Welcome. This is the School District of Prescott Board of Education regular meeting. I'll call this meeting to order, subject section 1983 Wisconsin statutes. Our first item is to adopt the agenda. Rick, is there any changes?
There's no substantive changes. Administration would like to break item G into two. It's when we deal with our policy. Specifically, it's item F, which is to update our Title IX Regulations 2264 that are already on the books, and then 2266. We'd like to make those as two separate motions.
Okay. If nothing else, we can take a motion here.
I move to approve the agenda as presented with the changes by Dr. Spicuzza.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Next item is Pledge of Allegiance. Pat, you want to lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next up is the public comment, recognition of visitors. So as usual, I read these before. Please approach the podium one at a time, stating your name, your municipality, and topic you would like to address. A lot of time is 3 minutes per individual, or 6 if you're representing a group. All comments should be directed to the board and not to staff or other participants. The board will not act on any comments that are made during the meeting, and the presiding officer may direct the district administrator to follow up with that individual at a later date. And lastly, the public comment section will be limited to 30 minutes unless board action is taken to extend. And if you would like to see the full description of the public comment policy, please refer to our policy 1673. So anybody at this time would like to approach the podium? Now would be the right time. No, just come up and state your name and municipality, and that's good enough.
Hi, my name is Crystal Kammerer. I am a parent of 2. Today I'm speaking on behalf of a group. We're a group of parents from 3 licensed daycare providers here in town. All of us parents have children who should be attending 4K in the district this school year. While I know it's been a tough decision to reduce the number of bus routes and implement walking boundaries, I'm asking the board to consider providing transportation for 4K students from the 3 licensed daycare providers. Some may ask, why a transportation exemption just for 4K? Aren't K through 12 students and parents just as inconvenienced? The answer is that while I empathize with the hardships and potential safety concerns the new transportation plan may cause our K-12 families, eliminating busing to and from licensed daycares disproportionately impacts our 4K students and will ultimately prevent several 4K students from attending public school. This is based on 2 major factors. 4K students have a unique class time schedule, and they lack the ability to attend the district's before and after school Y Care program that the K through 5 students have access to right now. While I'm certain it's unintended, I'd like to shed some light on the fact that the new transportation policy appears to be inequitable. If I'm understanding it correctly, if a 4K student who attends daycare was lucky enough to obtain a placement at one of the 4K sites that are located at a center, so like New Adventures or Heart, Hands, and Minds, they have access to transportation next school year. But students who are given placements at Malone or St. Joe's won't have that same access to education unless they're coming from a daycare that happens to cross, I think it's Highway 10 and 35, if I'm correct. Our parent group has collected responses on their plans for the next month, and only one family is high income enough to pull their child out of daycare and take a leave of absence from their job in order to get them to school. One has hired a private nanny that can transport their kids. And a few are planning to opt out of the district's program and enroll them in an expensive private full-day 4K program across the border. However, most parents are saddened that unless the board takes action, they will be notifying the district that their child will be unable to attend 4K. They'll have to remain in daycare. Unfortunately, our family falls into the latter group. I'm a public school teacher, so I understand the importance of early education. I don't want my son to fall behind with his peers, and I also can't leave my classroom of kids to shuttle my own child to and from daycare to school. My son is so excited to go to school. He's already learned his teacher's name, he's picked out his backpack, he's bought his school supplies, and it's gonna break my heart when I have to tell him that he's no longer going to school this year. He doesn't understand what a referendum is or what the impact of 12 votes can be, and he won't understand why he'll have to watch the other 4-year-old children at his in-home licensed daycare board the bus to school. If I understand the changes in the transportation, the other kids at his daycare will be able to go because they were lucky enough to obtain a 4K site location at a building that crosses a hazardous highway. So it's my understanding that the bus will pick up some of the students at this daycare, but not the others. After conversations with the former director of transportation, it's my understanding that providing 4K busing to licensed daycares would be minuscule to the transportation budget, and our neighboring districts with similar funding issues have exempted 4K kids from walking boundaries. I get it, the referendum failed, and the board has to make really unfortunate and stressful reductions. However, on behalf of all the Prescott 4-year-olds who are eager and excited to begin their education, please consider granting an exception to our district's newest learners.
Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal.
Anybody else in the audience care to be recognized here? All right, we're going to move on. Thank you. Good news.
All right, so we have 3 quick ones. Just wanted to thank the partnerships that we have with out in the community. We are at Malone Elementary, partnering with AmeriCorps Reading Corps that serves students who are in need of early intervention. We have a public or a parent within the community that is specifically trained and provides that intervention on site. The outside observers come in and look at percent of fidelity. She hit 100%. The number of students who are exceeding the targeted growth was 87%. So I just wanted to applaud just the partnership that we have with AmeriCorps and the focus on reading by Sarah Dusick and Michael Kozmowski. In addition, Brighter Smiles provides individuals with free teeth screening and dentistry, and we have continued to surpass the numbers of students that have been screened and provided free dental work. And then lastly, I just wanted to congratulate our family. We oftentimes celebrate different things. I became officially a grandfather on July 11th, 7/11. So that's our lucky day. And that's it for good news.
Congratulations, Rick.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We're going to move on then to the business. Let's just get things pulled up here. So for first item is consent. We have June 19th, 2024 regular board meeting minutes, finance report, personnel report for non-licensed staff, OSHA guidelines for annual approval, the 2024-25 head coaches, acceptance of Neola School Board technical updates and changes for the following board policies per the district administrator's responsibility. And they're listed there under number 5 or 6. Did I get that right? Is that it?
On the Neola, yep.
No, did I miss one? Or is that it?
Goes through 8651.
I feel like I got, yeah, that's it. Okay. That's everything in consent. Is there anything the board would like to pull off consent?
Nope.
No.
Nope, okay. I will then adopt the consent agenda. Are there any objections? No objections. The consent agenda is adopted. Thank you. And we're going to move on to the next business item, which is consider personnel reports for licensed staff, and we got hires first.
Yes, we have hires. We have 5 individuals who are up for hire. We have a middle school PE teacher, Samuel Swick. We have a Malone special ed aide, Teresa, is it Shanis? Aria Wells for a high school ELA teacher. Carly Erickson, a middle school ID teacher, and then Mr. Matt Smith returning as activity director. Those are the 5 individuals for hire. We do have 2 resignations. Mackenzie Coda, our district occupational therapist, and today we received notice of Dylan Larson, who will be leaving as a special ed teacher. We have no retirements.
Any questions or comments down here? Alan, Vicki? No? Tanya, Pat, any comments or questions?
No questions.
Just really quick, Rick, the ones that, all the hires, they're backfills for positions that post-referendum cuts, we're hiring because they're critical path, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, 2 are to provide services in the special ed department that are, federally mandated. We did have a resignation of an ELA teacher, so these are all open positions that were necessary to be filled.
Okay, and I'll just... One name I have some familiarity with is Matt Smith, and welcome back, Matt. I'm glad we got that position filled. It's great to see. And we're going to miss Mackenzie. All right. Anybody want to make a motion here?
I move to approve the personnel report for the licensed staff listed above.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That one carries. Next one is consider the administration's proposal for busing to 4K centers and licensed daycare.
Yes, so nice timing. Thank you for being here. Obviously, anytime we have to make adjustments and cuts, it's very difficult. The individual that presented earlier today was accurate with regards to most of the information that we eliminated in-town busing within 2 miles. We do have hazardous zones that are identified, and by statute, we do have to provide transportation for those hazard zones. Obviously, because of where some of our 4K centers are situated, they created a difference with regards to how busing would occur. However, I have been working with Heather Christensen, our new Director of Transportation, and then Rick Montreal, who is the supervisor, but also the dean for the high school. They have put forward a proposal. We had been working also with New Adventures, as you know, and Tracy Collins. You had asked me to reach out to Tracy and talk with her. We have come up with a proposal for the board to consider. What we would like to suggest is that as our 4K centers are basically satellites, they are providing public education for our programming, that as long as they are outside the 2-mile radius, they would be picked up and bused like any other student, and then within day and after day transportation would occur. In addition, we do have licensed daycares that are out there, and we believe that those daycares provide an important service to our families, and if they are within the 2-mile radius, we would ask that the transportation be allowed to provide transportation to the licensed daycares. Currently, there are 2 licensed daycares within our 2-mile radius, and that allows us, I think, to provide the transportation before and after school in a safe way, but also to honor the service that provides to our families. The differentiation here is that they have to be licensed. There are some stipulations and procedures that go into that. Anybody else that there is a website where we can track any licensure, and Sarah Dusick has been working with our 4K centers, but also has provided the information to our transportation director. We believe that this can be done with little to no additional time with regards to our routes, and little, if any, additional cost. And we think it's a win-win for everyone.
Vicki, any questions?
Yeah, I guess cost-wise, what are we looking at as far as expense here for this?
Well, for the 4K, it doesn't truly differentiate because the routes were already set up. For the in-town, we believe that because right now it's only 2 and they're within reasonable kind of how the routes are already laid out, really it's only a time factor for a stop. The reason that we're going with licensed is that obviously every cul-de-sac could say we're being the household daycare center, and that's where the main reason that we're going with state licensed daycare or childcare.
You want me to come back to you if you have more?
I'm sure I got more questions, but numbers, do we know numbers of kids at this point, what we're looking at? So outside of the 2 miles, we were going to provide the busing because 4K, it's run through the school, they're students, so that was provided. So do we know numbers of our 4K and, I guess, enrollment?
Yeah, so basically, and Sarah, you might have some of the information. Do you want to come on up? I mean, in talking with Tim and Heather, you're talking about maybe 10 students total. As you remember, these are, 4K is only a half-day program,
Yep.
so many parents will drop their children off on the way to work at 6 in the morning, and
Right.
so they're
Yep.
staying. All we're doing is making sure that at the end of the day, our buses are already going to be there because we're picking up 4K students that live 2 miles out, and we're just picking those students up for 4K at New Adventures. And literally, it's 2 blocks right across 10th Street.
Yeah.
And mostly what we do is if students are already at New Adventures for daycare, we usually place them at New Adventures, same thing with Hearts, Hands, and Mind.
Yep.
So really, it's our licensed in-home daycare centers
Okay.
that it affects that we need to get them either to the St. Joe site, New Adventures site, or Hearts, Hands, and Mind site based
Okay.
on that student placement. And I know Heather was going to reach out to the ones that we know that are licensed and just get a number, but our best guess estimate would be that it's under 10 kids between the 2 in-home daycares that we have seen through licensing with the state.
Okay.
So about 10 students that could get
Okay.
busing from in-home daycares.
Okay. And that would be like twice a day, like get them there and then get them back to their daycare.
Yeah, so if
Okay.
they are an AM student, they would just, like if there's other school age students at those licensed daycares, they would all get on the bus, go to their respective places, and then at the end of the AM session, we would bus them to the in-home daycare, licensed in-home daycare, and then carry on with our routes. And then if they're, depending on if they're in the AM or PM route area, we would pick them up at the licensed daycare for the PM class. And then at the end of the day, just like all the other kids, they would get bused, but we have an added stop at the licensed daycares.
Okay, so we would use like maybe the bus that goes across the road to the development on the
It's-
other side of the highway.
It's my understanding from Tim and Heather that it's really, like he said, like it's just time. We basically go past those locations anyway.
Yep.
It's just the time to stop, open the doors, let kids in
Yep.
and out, and then get back on.
Okay.
Helen?
I don't think I have any questions per se. Are there any daycares currently that are in the licensing process right now? Because that would, I mean, say there's 2 now, but if there's all of a sudden 7 pop up, and then you're, so I don't know
I
if
can't
that's-
see that there's any in process, but it's a super extensive process to get licensed for daycare, and you're held under really strict like protocols that you have to follow. So I don't anticipate that just people would randomly get themselves licensed in order to do it, because I mean it's pretty strict protocols. Like there's more daycares going away from getting licensed because of the protocols than getting licensed.
Okay.
Tanya, any questions?
No, I guess my one question would be, if people do become licensed, or if the center, the in-home daycare does become licensed, I just want to make sure that we have a process that people can reach out, whether it's an email or however that works, but it's advertised that there's a process where they can get added to that list. I don't really foresee each site, there's a ratio of kids that can be there. It's going to be minimal at that, at each site, so I don't think that'll be an issue for us, being able to bus them as well. I just want to make sure that's accessible to families.
Right, and I also, like, in talking to Heather today, you know, like, we have gone onto the state sites to identify who's licensed within our non-busing zone, and we keep saying we see 2, other than New Adventure, so there's 2 in-homes that we know that are licensed.
Yep.
If there are other in-homes that are licensed that we aren't aware of, or we aren't populating in that, if you're a licensed daycare, reach out to the school district to let us know, and we'll work to get those onto the routes.
And if we could just post that on the website or whatever that is, so people can see. And then I think really just win-win, right? We know that early childhood education is one of those game changers for kids to kind of even the playing field based on whatever background they're coming from and all other kinds of things. It's also good for us when it comes to enrollment and stuff. We want these kids in our system. We want them working with our staff and our teachers, and we want to be able to kind of maintain them within our system. So it's a great service, I think, for our community. It also helps us. And these are unique students because of age that they're not walking 2 miles by themselves. And daycares have done a really good job advocating. I mean, we've heard from many licensed daycares and centers saying like it is just going to be really difficult for them to be able to pick kids up, transport them back and forth, you know, up to 4 times a day. So I appreciate this. I think it's good partnership. I do think it's little cost, but it's a good value for both families and us.
I think in talking to Heather, one of the concerns that we have that she is on already is that our buses are full. We went down 2 routes, right? And so our buses are at capacity, and she said she's already prepared for like in the neighborhoods where those licensed daycares are, people saying like, well, we're in that neighborhood and you stop anyway, can we just throw our kids on? And physically we can't. You know, so that just messaging is clear that they have to be a person who attends that licensed daycare in order to get on the bus at that stop, because our buses are full.
I'm absolutely positive that we'll hear the negative from this positive as well. So thank you, Bill.
Pat? My only would be just kind of a clarification on the potential motion. Tanya kind of brought it up. Right now, there's 2 that we know about. We don't anticipate there being a 3rd, but we are going to, you know, kind of make some policy here. For future years' consideration, this is just something that we say all licensed daycares right now, and if we have to reconsider, relook at it, we do it at that time? Or does the motion need today say 2? You know what I mean, Mike?
Yeah. It doesn't say 2 now.
Well, I know it doesn't.
Well, and it just says licensed daycare. We maybe should clarify that says within.
Well, that wouldn't matter, because if they're out of the 2-mile radius, we're going to bus them anyway.
No, but I mean, it should be licensed daycare in Prescott. You know what I mean?
Within Prescott School District boundaries?
Right,
Sure.
yeah.
I like not specifying a number, because then it doesn't have to come back.
All right. Yep. Okay. I'm good with that. Nope, that makes sense.
If we get more licensed, that it just falls under that licensed category.
Yeah, and if it becomes a problem, then we deal with it. So.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, I agree with everybody's comments. I don't have anything else to add. It seems like a win-win. Rick added some language to the motion if anybody's looking at it. If that looks good, we can go.
In my research today, there is a distinguish between licensed and certified, but they're basically the same process. So I think in the licensed daycare, certified daycares fall under that license. As long as they're registered with the state and they have different protocols in place, I think it should be deemed. Because we do have one in-home that isn't considered licensed, but they're considered certified, but they still have other protocols in place than just, I opened a daycare and have a cul-de-sac.
So that certified one, is that counted right now within the 2?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Well, so then
that
should be the
certified?
right, we should change that verbiage.
Licensed and certified?
Okay.
Or is it licensed or certified?
Or
Licensed
certified.
or, okay.
Okay.
But certification
per
is
state.
way less than license, so could that open like more of a, kind of a bubble?
It could open a bubble, but if we are strictly just licensed, then we eliminate one of the in-home daycares.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I mean, you guys can make that designate. I'm not prepared right now to tell you the complete difference between licensed and certified. I know there's a process for both, and they are held to a different standard than just I opened a daycare. I don't know the difference between the two, but I do know that one of the in-homes is licensed and one is certified, and they come up under the same search database
Okay,
on the
on the
state
state
site.
side. So the state is still putting them all together as
Right.
one, okay.
Thanks, Sarah. Anybody want to take a motion here? Or make one?
Yeah, I move to approve the administration's proposal for busing to 4K centers and state licensed or certified daycares within a 2-mile radius of the Prescott School District.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you. And item D is consider Prescott School District's 2024-25 academic standards. Damn it. And Michael is ready to roll.
Ready to roll. So every year at the beginning of the school year, which there's some debate on when's the beginning of the school year. Is it your August meeting or is it your July meeting? We've been advised to go with the July meeting. So this is the official first school board meeting of the new school year. We need to declare what our standards are, and the state statute spells out very specifically which ones we need to declare. So they're reading and writing, mathematics, science, history, geography, and one relatively new is personal financial literacy. That was new 2 years ago. It's actually now a state requirement for graduation, personal financial literacy, and we're ahead of the curve. 2 years ago when we adopted these standards, we also made that part of our graduation requirements. So I'm just presenting them here today. There are no changes for the last 2 years in which standards we are basing our curriculum on. We do list off, and there's a website listing, it's under the teaching and learning. We actually list off all of our standards that we use in every different department, not just the ones that we're required to. So people can find which standards we're basing our programming on that website. So no new changes. It's something that we need to adopt every year.
Yeah, so I just want to point out, as Michael was talking, is if you go to our website under Teaching and Learning, there's a plethora of information, not only just about academics, it's about early literacy, how assessment is used, how we adopt curriculum and things like that. So I just am showing that up on the screen right now.
Any questions, Pat?
No.
Tanya?
No.
Vicki, Helen?
No questions?
No, me neither. Thanks, Michael. Take a motion.
I move to approve the district's 2024-25 academic standards.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That one carries. Item E, consider food services proposal for increased meal and menu item prices.
Come on over, Nicole. So Nicole Lenzner, as you know, presented last month. We went through kind of a year-end review of our food service and also pointed out just some of the challenges that we've had over the last few years with inflation, food costs. We spent over $100,000 more on food this year. Nicole and food service brought in more revenue than it has over the last 2 years, but it also had expenses that were extremely high. We currently do have a fund balance in food service, Fund 50. It's down to $35,000. It's a decrease of $125,000. Fund 50 is exactly like Fund 27 in that they cannot go below zero, and they are their own institutions, their own kind of subdivision within a school district. The reason I mention that is currently we cross-subsidize special education by $1.8 million. And if we continue on this trajectory, we'll end up having to take Fund $10 and fund our food program. The one mechanism that we have is obviously food prices. And so Nicole presented all that information to you last month, and she can kind of walk us through again where we are with the prices and if there are any changes from last month.
And Rick, do you have the slides?
I do.
Awesome. They're kind of easier to follow.
Give me 1 sec.
So while Dr. Spacuz is pulling up the slides, you'll note that the bulk of it is in the meals, and then there's only a couple that were adjusted below it. I think it's 3 to 5. So luckily, we're seeing those prices drop. Granted, it's pennies. So we're hopeful it continues to go. It's going in the right direction, so that's why those kind of stayed the same. It's the meal prices that are not good. Okay, so we'll start with the revenue. So the revenue was $126,000, more than anticipated, which is great, right? Good, wonderful, except that the costs were more. So if you look back pre-COVID numbers, so a little background on that. When COVID happened, the government gave us a lot of extra money, which was great, except a lot of things started to rely on that, and now they're all dwindling down. So when we look at it, it's still well over $200,000 more than fiscal year 2019, pre-COVID. The additional pandemic funding has ended, and the reimbursement rates have shrunk back to the pre-COVID numbers. So those are kind of the effects. And then the back of the house costs. So the nutrition service department paid a bunch of money for credit card processing fees in fiscal year 2024. With the move to Infinite Campus, we're going to rectify that and get it adjusted. Inflation also, you know, when your grocery bills go up, it's not just 2 kids, it's a lot more kids. So it affects us a little more, but like I said, we're seeing that downward spiral, and I'm crossing my fingers that when I look in late July to kind of confirm those numbers, that they're still going down. And even though it's pennies, I feel that'll continue to be the trend. So some of those funds that we took out of the Fund 50 were used to kind of slingshot us into next year. So we took the opportunity to pre-purchase some menu items. So for instance, we got a really, I can't even express to you, like if you get the golden coupon for the grocery store, that's the deal we got. So we have many chicken strips and like the staple things. We have burgers, we have meatballs, we have chicken patties and chicken nuggets. So the things that the kids really like, we kind of put our money in so that way we can save money next year. So I envision it like a slingshot, you know, to drive us forward. The fund balance is lower than we'd like to see, but with the following strategies, we plan on growing it back to a healthy fund balance. And then additional savings. We did take one position and put it on hold here at the high school location, and that is going to be made up by the assistant director and myself. So we kind of hop in and help cover during the lunch period. That also means I need to get my pool of subs. So if anybody knows anybody, that's what we're going for, 2 or 3 more. So with that, we'll save about $16,000, which isn't, you know, a lot, but it's something. So we're looking for everywhere we can kind of work towards. And then our proposed price increases, you all have a link to the Excel sheet as well. But like I said, it's mainly those lunch ones, and it's a quarter. So that way we'll be set for hopefully years to come. And then the solutions, so the price increases and then continued participation increases. We have lots of really fun events coming up this year that I think will continue to draw the kids in. And those events are very fiscal. I think, well, I know, I spent $40 for an event for 5 schools last year, and it meant the world to these kids when they pulled the tray, and they were the lucky tray day winners, and they got this little tiny basket with little, you know, plastic pieces of gold. But it got them all excited, and it got them all to be like, oh my gosh, I want to come that day. So super exciting. With the position pause, that'll save an extra amount of money, and then we maximize our discounted menu items. We also took those items, and since they're the most popular, we kind of duplicated them. Usually we would try to space out a little more to get more variety, but they really like cheeseburgers. I can't express to you how long the lines are on cheeseburger day. And then we're going to advocate for free meals for all students, because, you know, that would just be amazing.
Vicki, any questions here?
I heard the cookies are a huge hit, so way to keep the
Those
cookies.
I can't even tell you, we make 200 a day, and they're only getting 1 or 2 each.
Yeah.
But it's kids that pack their lunch too, come in and they
Yep,
love that.
yep, and they love
and
the
then we do
cookies,
special
so.
events too, and they get one, yeah.
So yeah, I think to see some of the changes that you've made, and then, yeah, items like that, those sorts of things that are flying off the shelves and getting kids to purchase things and
maybe
I
more
guess
healthy
keeps,
things.
yeah, keeps parents, aware of what all is out there and what's available, and for sure, I know you had said you're gonna make sure that everybody gets information on free and reduced. So
Correct.
that it's not just the ones you know of, but everybody's got it.
Yep.
So
I'm
even
so
if,
excited.
even if they think they may or may not, at least they've got the opportunity to see if they are, so.
Absolutely.
so that's
Everybody
good.
apply. I don't care if I
Yeah.
have to do an application for every single family. Just
Yep.
do it.
Yep, yeah, and I think at this point in time, like, everybody knows food costs are expensive. I mean, we all notice it when we go to the grocery store. So I think for parents who are wondering, do I or don't I, and is it gonna look bad or not, I think you just do it if it's there and it's offered to you. Save yourself some money with your school lunches and use that money at home for
Right,
for your food.
absolutely.
So,
Yep.
thank you, Nicole.
Just a quick question about, we talked a little bit about, you talked about meals for staff. How, is that improving? Like, are more staff taking meals,
So
or-
Dr. Spacuz and I are working on an initiative to get a ticket out to everybody for just one free meal for the school year. So we're not gonna tell them special day, because they'll totally kill my cooks, and I love them all. We gotta keep them.
Yeah, yeah.
But give them a meal ticket, so like, golden ticket, come in and try it. But I think once they figure out that they can come in and try it, and it's convenient, and it's actually good food, that will get a lot more. But yeah, we're working on that. We're working on how to streamline it, so that way they don't have to wait in line. And I think that's a big thing too, because when you're a teacher, you don't
Have the
really
time.
get a break,
Yeah.
you're on break.
Yep.
But like, you're still doing a million things, so getting them to move quicker.
Okay.
Tanya?
Yeah, this is great. I'm just looking at numbers, so it looks like we had a $74,000 roughly kind of gap that we're trying to recoup by at least. About 16, 17,000 was gonna be 17,000 by credit cards, so that'll be a nice shift. I also think besides just we are recouping, it's wild that we had $17,000 worth of credit card fees in nutrition services alone. So I think great that we're recouping that. Also, it's really gonna be more convenient for families to have all of their kind of bills and school fees all coming out of the same spot, so that'll be great. $16,000 being recouped roughly from the hiring of freezing that hire. So we're at about a little over 30,000. So it sounds like the difference really is the increase is supposed to be able to do that, as well as kind of some of that food savings that you purchased ahead of time.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's great. We talked about this, I think it was last month or the month before, the potential of having to do this. It's still a very reasonable price for food. And I think beyond, it's one of those things that we have to do in order to right-size our budget there. So it's just something we have to do. But yeah, I appreciate the presentation, and it sounds great.
Pat?
No questions. Thanks,
Yeah.
Nicole.
I'm good, Nicole, thank you.
Have a good night, thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
All right, anybody want to make a motion here?
I move to approve the food service proposal for increased meal and menu items for the 2024-25 school year.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That one carries. Item F, consider Neola School Board policies addressing required Title IX guidelines.
So remember, at the beginning of this meeting, administration put forward to a change. So item F is with regards to 2264, and then item G will be 2266. Sandy Strand is here to present on both the Title IX regulations and the non-discrimination based on sex in education. And she is is our kind of primary officer, and we'll talk a little bit about that, as well as Chantel Byram, who is our HR director. I do want to just put up on the screen, Sandy, before you get into your presentation, that we are looking at two Title IX policies tonight, and part of the rationale for that is with regards to the new released federal guidelines and the time periods in which they cover. And so I just wanted to put up, this is almost could have been in consent, but we wanted to help the community understand that we currently have non-discrimination policies. It's in our mission statement. It's part of our 5 Rs. And so for non-discrimination based on sex and education and programs, many people think of Title IX with regards to athletics, right? But historically, and Sandy will do a nice job of explaining, this is the policy already on our books. There are 2 changes. One is in the first part that this policy that already is on the books would be effective starting on August 1st to cover any behavior or issue that occurred up through July 31st, 2024. The other change, as you can see in Neola, you know that anytime there's color on the screen, that means that there's been something that's been updated or changed. And so as you go through the policy, there's a lot of definitions. And then you get to, we must have a Title IX coordinator. It has to be published within your policy, and it also has to be on the website. Sandy will talk a little bit about some flexibility that the federal government is giving. We are going to ask you to also approve that we will have a generic email, so that it'll say Title IX at Prescott. It right now reads in the policy Title IX grievance.
Yeah.
We're just asking you to approve that we will have a generic, we're still working with tech. It ultimately has to be in our policy and also on the website. We just want to see which one works more directly or is intuitive. This allows us, as people change or if we have to modify whether or not it's special education or HR, that the email address isn't personalized. So with that, I think there really isn't anything else unless you have questions. Those are the changes to 2264. And then
2266.
2266.
They went backwards in their numbering.
Yep, they did. Yep, you're right.
All right. Any questions on this one, Tanya?
So all the numbers here, are we talking F right now on the agenda?
So this is F that was split into
yeah.
2, F and G. F is about this
Yeah.
one, 2266.
Yep. And this one is just some of the smaller changes and stuff. Yeah, I have no questions here.
Yep. Pat?
My only question is, well, so we do list, we list a person and a position and a specific email in 2266.
We do.
Right? And I'm jumping ahead. That will not be the case, though, for the next one that we are going to be reviewing, right? But it's okay
correct.
here.
Yeah, it's okay here.
All right.
Yep. And
Okay.
actually, that's one of the flexibilities that's coming in the
Okay,
future.
thanks. That was my only question.
Helen? Vicki?
No.
Yeah, this one's straightforward. So let's take a motion on this one.
I move to approve current school board policy 2266 Title IX coverage dates. Hang on. Sorry, Rick. Yep. I am, and that doesn't look right.
Yeah, that's why I was confused. So the numbers.
Yeah, it shouldn't be Title IX coverage dates. It should be the name of the policy.
So we're in,
For the school board policy is 2266?
Yep.
Yep. So the policy number's right, but the title is wrong on the electronic right now.
okay.
And same with H, because, well, now it changed.
So stick with the policy name, our number.
Yep.
It's 2266.
Yep, okay. Try it again here. I move to approve the current school board policy 226 coverage dates and updated email reporting process.
2266.
2266 coverage dates and updated email reporting process.
I'll second.
And I'm going to just jump in here. We got a motion and a second. This is the first reading that we have on this. And are we saying that because of the August 1st, 2024 deadline, we are going to approve this into policy after the first reading?
Okay, so that's where I was a little confused. So this one seems to me like this was
This is
just
an
the very
existing
basic one.
This is an existing
It's
policy.
Existing, it's just the really basic changes that could have been essentially in consent.
Just technical edits
It's the
only.
next item on here that we'll probably want to have further discussion about.
Okay, so since it's already in policy and we've already, this goes in immediately, right? No, this is effective?
And I think it was just.
Like any other policy?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was just
I just
grouped
want,
together
I want to
because they
clear it
had
up because I
commonalities,
get
but-
confused on that too.
I was too.
Yep. And part of the, well, and Sandy will do a nice job of weaving these together, but we wanted to make sure they are technical changes. It could have been up higher. But one of the questions many districts have faced and school boards have faced is why do you have to have two Title IX policies? And it's because the law in the future one that we're going to discuss, 2264, is effective for any behavior or conduct of an employee or staff member that occurs after August 1st. So you have to keep both in place until behavior is no longer brought forward.
And for clarification, what we're voting, or the motion I made, was that the existing policy that covers the timeframe that you just described is policy 2266, and the motion only includes technical modifications for coverage dates and updated email reporting process.
Yes.
That is accurate.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second. I think we're good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Okay, next one is item G, which is about policy 2264, and it's a new policy for Title IX.
Yes.
Ready? Sandy?
Yep.
All right.
Wanted to just try to simplify this as much as possible. These are the same policy. And as Dr. Spicuzza alluded to or mentioned directly, actually, is that we have to have both policies on the books because there is some language changes to 2264 that was not previously in 2266. Therefore, any conduct that is considered to be sex discrimination or sex harassment that is reported occurring prior to August 1st of 2024, we would consider that conduct under the policy 2266 that you just approved nominal changes to. If conduct occurs after August 1st, 2024, the federal government is telling us that we have to consider that conduct and those reports of sex discrimination and sex-based harassment under the new policy of 2266. If we have something that began last school year and it continues into this school year, let's say it's an AI issue or something similar, then we would have to work with legal counsel to discern which elements of each policy we would consider in investigating and making decisions about consequences in that. Essentially, this has been distilled by everybody and their brother nationwide, but our legal counsel that I've been participating in trainings with, they have whittled this down to about 8 to 10 areas, and I've tried to limit them to 8 areas. The biggest one is that it is in effect August 1st, 2024. And so that is why Dr. Spicuzza mentioned multiple times the one-time necessity possibly of a single reading of a policy. That's the board's decision. In the policy, there's expanded definition of sex discrimination and sex-based harassment, and I'll be specific about that. There's a broader scope of what is a covered activity and a broader scope of who can be a complainant. There's heightened oversight, meaning there's increased Title IX coordinator responsibilities, and there are now considerations for students with disabilities, which is really straightforward. There are expanded reporting and record-keeping requirements, and increased emphasis on supportive measures and documenting those supportive measures, and then increased training requirements. So if you go to the next slide, I think I have two, yeah, perfect. So when we talk about the expanded definitions of sex discrimination, in the 2266 policy that was revised in 2020, the old language says a recipient institution, meaning any agency that is receiving federal funds, must operate its education program or activity in a non-discriminatory manner free of discrimination based on sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity. The new rule defines sex discrimination as including discrimination based on sex stereotypes, sex characteristics, pregnancy or related conditions, sexual orientation, or gender identity. So they add additional describing language as to who can bring a claim or file a grievance. Next slide. The expanded definition of sex harassment. The old rule talked about the quid pro quo complaints, and that is really, the type of workplace abuse that occurs when an authority figure, like a supervisor or manager, offers or withholds benefits or opportunities in exchange for unwelcome sexual advances. But it does not mention the creation of a hostile work environment. So the new policy language includes actions that create a hostile work environment. So it's not necessarily that it is just the act of withholding an opportunity or benefit. It is the creation of a hostile environment that is subjectively or objectively offensive and is so severe or pervasive that it limits or denies a person the ability to participate in or benefit from our educational program or activity.
And Sandy, just for clarification too, with 2264, the new regulations, this is a policy that applies both to all staff members and staff, and it's one reason why we made our officers both Director of Student Services and then Chantel with HR.
In terms of the complainants and the scope of conducts, the old rule stated that the policy does not apply to sexual harassment that occurs off school grounds, in private settings, and outside the scope of the board's education programs and activities. The new rule states that districts now have an obligation to address sex-based hostile environment harassment, even some conduct alleged to be contributing to a hostile environment, if it occurs outside the district's education program or activity outside the United States. So this is very similar to WIAA rules, where if a student is found guilty of imbibing in drugs or alcohol, they would have to suffer the consequences of the policy, even if the behavior did not occur at a school-sponsored event or on school grounds. It also expands this to outside the United States. Previously, if we were to take a student trip to Greece or Rome, that was not covered under Title IX, and now it is saying that if you are on a school-sponsored event overseas, this policy also would apply. All right, so they went really crazy on the pregnancy thing. The old rule really didn't go into a lot of detail around provisions for pregnancy. Next slide.
That was quick.
The new rule make it clear that it includes harassment on the basis of sex stereotypes, sex characteristics, parental, family, or marital status, pregnancy, lactation, and related medical conditions, sexual orientation, gender identity. So it adds all of the parental, family, marital, pregnancy, lactation, or related medical conditions to its language. It prohibits districts from treating students, employees, or applicants differently based in conjunction with parental, family, or marital status. It defines pregnancy or related conditions as the following. Some of these things, underlying lactation, we're already taking steps in the district to provide safe, private, secure locations for staff and students, if necessary, to be able to pump and have their privacy without discrimination, and we're creating schedules and times for them to do that. It includes medical conditions related to pregnancy, childbirth, termination of pregnancy or lactation, or recovery from pregnancy. And it's related, the requirements obviously vary when it's an employee versus a student, right? Because employees have their regular FMLA leave as well. Next slide. It defines pregnancy for staff and students. It requires districts to take actions to prevent the discrimination, all the things, and again, lactation space for students and employees. So they're really capitalizing on that particular item. All right, so this is the coordinator duties. I'm so excited about all of this. So in the previous version of the law, they really loosely speak of the coordinator, the investigators, the decision makers, and there was no provision for a coordinator to be able to initiate a grievance. Now, in 2024, it clarifies that the coordinator can also be the investigator and the decision maker. So in a small district like ours, where we don't have 8,000 buildings and a ton of levels of administration, that's helpful. It also allows the coordinator to delegate to appropriately trained individuals, and what that would look like in our district would be that our building administrators would also be trained as investigators. So if there were a situation where it just makes more sense, or it's more timely for them to handle a situation, we would work collaboratively to ensure that they can investigate, have the correct documentation, and there's also a provision now for an informal resolution, which might be something that would happen at the building level. The coordinator must respond when there is knowledge of conduct that reasonably may constitute sex discrimination, with 2 T's including, typo, offering and coordinating supportive measures. And what legal counsel is saying about the supportive measures is things like schedule changes. You know, we do this all the time already. If a student is being bullied or whatever, we will switch their schedule so they're not in the same classes, or perhaps we allow them to take an online class because of a particular circumstance. We have to not only offer those, coordinate those, and then document what those were in our record-keeping system for Title IX. The new
Can I ask
law.
a quick question
go for
there?
it.
So when this would allow for the victim maybe staying in the class and the decision being the perpetrator's leaving then?
Yes. It could be. It also allows for the coordinator to initiate the complaint. So if in conversation with a building administrator, it's shared that a particular situation occurred in the building and we're talking about, well, gosh, it just doesn't feel right, I'm not sure, the student doesn't want to file the complaint, but if we believe as an administrative team that it is pervasive and it's serious, the coordinator can then initiate the complaint on behalf of the child. And it also allows for anybody else representing the child, like a parent or a guardian, or a teacher, to be able to also initiate a complaint on behalf of a child. And the crux of all of this is that the expectation is that the district takes prompt and effective action to end sex discrimination, prevent its recurrence, and remedy its effects. That's bottom line. Additionally, I have mentioned this already, we have to address all reports. It does not have to be just one person who's reporting it. It could be multiple people. We have to ensure proper training and compliance with record-keeping requirements and maintain all files for 7 years. And then ensure confidentiality, obviously. But also, what's the other, there's one, can you go to the next slide, please? I think it's in here already. In 2020, they used to require that complaints be written. This is another biggie. Now, it can be a verbal complaint. If somebody says something and you're like, ooh, that needs to go to the Title IX coordinator, and then we decide whether or not we're going to dismiss, investigate, or otherwise. A person other than the student or employee, I already mentioned this, and so I've already mentioned all of that. Students with disabilities, this makes sense. Anytime we're talking about students with disabilities under the purview of Title IX, and if we're talking about supportive measures or we're talking about any disciplinary action, we need to do that in conjunction with the 504 team and the IEP team.
Can I ask a quick question? Can you back to the last slide there, Rick? I think I understand, but when you say verbal complaint, do you mean the victim can verbally come to?
They can just come into Mr. Figge's office and say, I saw a picture of myself on the internet and I feel really uncomfortable with it. And then
before it had to be written?
Yeah.
Had to be a specific form, had to be.
If you wanted to file a Title IX complaint.
Okay.
And I think like a training element is it doesn't have to be just to the coordinator administrator, like teachers have to be able to recognize.
Exactly, and that's, we're going to talk about that.
But then when that verbal complaint comes in, then the Title IX coordinator has to document that.
Start documenting, and it may be, as kind of the point person, it may be where I would work with the building administrator and we would decide who's going to do what part of the investigation, or if the building administrator just wants me to do the investigation because I'm impartial and not in the building every day, we would work that out. But then we're going to have to create a system to keep all of these records then as well.
Would you do that anyways, though? I mean, is that kind of, you would do that anyways, right?
Yes.
If somebody comes to you or somebody comes to the building administrator and says something that they're feeling uncomfortable, that would be part of
we already do it. Like, we had a very a pretty big racial harassment issue at the middle school this year, and we did a very, very thorough investigation. We interviewed like 15 kids. After we met with each kid, we met with the perpetrator and the perpetrator's family. We met with all the families of the kids. So we were very, very thorough and took everything into account. We would do the very same thing here.
Okay.
Yeah. So I already talked about that. Record keeping, I already mentioned, you had to maintain it for 7 years previously, but now you got to keep everything. So if we decided we're going to make a schedule change, I would want a copy of the schedule previous to the event, and I'd want a copy of the schedule after the event, so that I can document that we had a supportive measure in place. So everything needs to be documented, and we also must maintain our training materials. One of the law offices that I've been participating in their trainings, they have a training that's coming up in August that will be recorded, and that we're hoping will be our training that we can use with all of our staff. So we're hoping to just get all of our licensed staff, and then we'll have to have a different time for our non-licensed staff to view the training. It's about a 45-minute training. All right, other training requirements. Everybody needs to be trained on the scope of conduct that constitutes sex discrimination and sex-based harassment. Training on topics related to responsibility, so their obligations to respond, what the grievance procedure is, meaning what is the complaint procedure, how to serve impartially, and the meaning of relevant in relation to questions and evidence and impermissible evidence. So there are informal resolutions that can occur upon designation, and annually they must do training. The district has to, again, address sex. I copied and pasted these from the legal presentation. You have to be trained on the scope of conduct that constitutes notification and information requirements, rules and practice, and then all employees upon hire or change in position and annually have to have this training. And the district, they have to have training around the district's obligation to address sex discrimination and sex harassment, and the scope of conduct that constitutes sex discrimination, including definition of sex-based harassment, notification, and information requirements.
And one of the differences between 2266 and now this one is that the informal resolution is an option.
Yeah.
And my understanding is it has to be mutually agreed upon, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And why that's important is, think of, if you're looking at this going, my goodness, this is workplace, and we've always explained, education is a highly regulated organization, institution. There are some things that are more flexible. So if an individual feels like they've been harassed, they can just tell you. And then we also have to publish who you should go to. There are timelines. It can be formal or informal. Before it had to be scripted, it was very prescribed how we had to fill out all the information. They're giving us some ability to say not everything is of the same magnitude. It is creating some flexibility in light of kind of reality of how schools function, given how many regulations there are.
So next steps are that we are required by federal law to have policy 2264 adopted by August 1st. We are required to ensure that we have coordinators and investigators who have appropriate training. We need to schedule time to train additional investigators, which we need to talk to as an administrative team about that, and then a time to train all staff, and possibly a time, I'll throw it out there, to maybe train some of our secondary students about what constitutes appropriate and inappropriate behavior in terms of sex harassment and sex discrimination. Just like we want to talk to them about not being racist and whatever. That's it.
Any specific questions or slides you want to go back to?
Yeah, any questions for Sandy or comments, Tanya, here?
Sure, I can start. First of all, I just want to reemphasize this is required by federal law. So it's not so much of a choice. If we make a choice of not implementing this, we will run the risk of losing federal funding.
That's true.
Which is a certain percent, not an insignificant percent of our budget. Yep. And then August 1st is fast, and lucky for us, we happen to have a board meeting tonight, but how long ago did we find out about this? And I mean, was it within the last couple months?
Yeah, they didn't actually release the language around this until like mid to late April.
Yeah.
And it took, I mean, the body of the document from the feds, it was like 1,500 pages long. So
That's
it took
the summation.
Yeah, that was the summation. It took legal counsel in all states a couple of months to kind of distill that into salient pieces, and then come up with sample policies like from Neola and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we're fortunate that we're working with an organization that helps us with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's coming fast because it came fast.
Yep. And I guess that was just kind of my emphasis, was that we often don't do first readings and then approve. And I think we might have some conversation about, do we do a first reading and then maybe we come back and do a second reading, just like as a single board agenda item or something. But we often don't do this, and it's not the best practice. We don't believe it to be the best practice because we want people to be able to kind of think about it and stuff. I'm open to either process that we go. Generally, where I'm coming from, though, is I believe in all of this stuff here. It protects rights of not only our students, but of our staff members, and I think that's really important, too. We're not just talking students, we're also talking staff. However, like, this is something that we can debate if we want to on it. It is required by law to do. And so that is part of the consideration that we have here. I also wanted to kind of add that You actually brought up the point about having kind of the verbal language used. I do think that a complaint or a report, I think that's going to be really a big part of change for us. Does our bullying, I was just looking it up, but does our bullying policy have verbal complaints right now? Because many districts have, like it could just be a verbal complaint versus written. And I can't remember, is it verbal here too? Yeah, that's what I thought. So really, I don't know if it'll be that big of a shift of recognizing staff. If you hear something, it needs to come forward. And I think we even talked about this at the end of the last school year with some of the stuff that arose up in our buildings of how we can start recognizing and interrupting and making sure that we're reporting as staff and students. So, and we have great student leaders in this building too, and in this district that I think will help us with this. But yeah, it seems like a ton of changes. I know that there's some language in there that people don't always feel comfortable with, and that's okay. At the end of the day, for me, it has to be implemented, and I also think it's a good thing to be implemented, so, yeah.
Pat?
No questions. Agree with a lot with what Tanya said. I think I would just further my own opinion on why we're going to consider this under a first reading is there's still a lot of information even yet to become out. There's been nothing through the courts. There frankly hasn't even been, and correct me if I'm wrong, complete guidance by the government on exactly how some of the questions and idiosyncrasies of this, will get governed. So any questions that we may have, we probably don't know anyway, along with the fine presentation, and I think the stuff that you and Dr. Spikuza provided to us prior to the meeting. I'm comfortable considering doing this on a first reading, but I have no questions regarding the policy right now.
Just in an effort to be completely clear, there is litigation in some circuit courts, but none of it impacts any district in the state of Wisconsin at this point.
Helen?
I think I'm just going to echo what they say. I don't have any questions. We, the policy needs to be there. It protects staff and students, which is important. And we've been reporters in the school district for quite some time. When you're a teacher or you're a student, you're supposed to report all that stuff anyway. So this just kind of lays it all out. Yeah, so I don't think I have any questions. Great. Yeah.
Vicki?
A lot of the categories were already there. We're just adding in employees, and we're putting in a much larger description of pregnancy and what all of that includes.
It's about time.
Well, it is about time, I always am a little saddened that we have to add that information in there. It shouldn't need to be there, but it does. So clarifying, being a lot more specific on those types of items, but then it is also giving you as a coordinator, and Chantel in this case as a coordinator, giving you direction, which you kind of had but didn't have. So this is helping you and spelling all of that out a little bit more, which is great because then you know.
Then I know what to do.
Yeah, there's no guessing, there's no do I or don't I, And then I think you've said it, you guys as teachers, as administrators, you see something, you already get in and try to resolve and work on issues. So it's saying that this is giving you some flexibility, which is great, because the sooner something can get resolved, the better it is. And then hopefully we don't have things that build and build and build over time because we needed to have it written down. And that's hard for maybe an individual to do.
And in the actual policy, you will notice that there are timeline provisions, so 5 days, 10 days, 30 days within which to complete the full investigation. There's provisions for appealing the decision. There's provisions for who those appeals go to, which would be the district administrator, Dr. Spikuza. So all of that, it really does put a lot more kind of grit into the policy.
Yeah, which I think is great.
Sandy, I know Mike will probably have some comments, but I just wanted also to kind of clarify something. Because this is a Title IX federally mandated policy, my understanding is that any entity within our community or anywhere else that receives federal dollars will also be implementing the same policy or
That
very
is
similar.
accurate. Any entity that receives any federal dollars.
Any federal dollars.
Has to abide by the anti-discrimination laws.
And I bring that up a lot because people often think that school districts put these big policies in place and it's just the school district and it's, my kids are, that is not the case. There are many entities, I was looking them up within our own community that will be doing the same policy because it's a federal mandated policy to protect the rights of individuals and staff members within agencies that receive federal funding. So this will be at our city council meetings. We should be expecting conversations about this. Libraries potentially. I mean, there's other places that receive federal dollars that will be having these same conversations. So, yep.
Spot on.
Great comments, great dialogue. I have a couple comments here. You mentioned what happens after August 1st and potential federal funding. But Rick, I mean, it's more than that, isn't it? If there was an incident that were to occur post August 1st and we do not have a policy implemented by then, what happens?
Yeah.
What could happen? What could potentially happen that put the district at liability?
Yeah, it is based on both the school board legal opinion and also the administrator from WASDA. The difficulty would be your other policy sunsets on any behavior or conduct that occurs up through July 31st. So that means any action that happens with regards to an employee at the district level or students, right? And we just talked about how it's equivalent to WIA rules. It's 365, 24/7. If any harassment, any issue with regards to pregnancy or discrimination occurs, and the employee or student brings it forward, and we do not have a Title IX adopted policy that is active, automatically we are in violation. And also if they make an Office of Civil Rights claim or make civil action, we would place the district at extreme risk because you don't have the protection, procedures, and investigative descriptions in place and protocol for how you deal with those grievances.
And Rick, last, just to stick on the legalities of everything or the liability, I know you sent out an email at the nth hour about Neola's recommendation that folks probably didn't get a chance to see, but are you able to post it? Just take a look at that. I mean, so Neola is our policy provider and gatekeeper for what we have as policy, and they help us with all of this. And I think it's important to understand that yes, there's legislation, there's court orders, there's things that are in play right now that could potentially impact decisions that will affect policy, right? And Neola's recommendation is basically what?
Yeah, so I can read it. Neola's recommendation per Neola's legal counsel, and that's why we pay for this service, is that Wisconsin school districts, with regards to Title IX regulations, remains the law in Wisconsin, and therefore the requirement to adopt the policy revisions provided in the June special update continues to be the law as well. Finally, if more definitive or directly applicable court orders, agency actions, suspensions of the application of new regulations, school boards that choose to adopt the current policy can always invoke policy 0131 to suspend the application of that policy. So basically it's saying if something goes awry, if it was somehow put a stay in the courts or at the federal level, Prescott Public Schools does have the ability to then automatically rescind that. So you always have an easy button out. I do think the specifics of this is really following the golden rule, right? We're just making sure that staff and students can come to work, come to a learning and work environment and not be harassed. There's protective classes, and we want to treat everybody in an inclusive and also respectful way. And when that goes sideways, we know who I can go to. Our officers that are identified as Title IX, and then there's guidelines to make sure that it's investigated and that we don't turn a blind eye to that.
So that hit on my last point. I just want to get through the liability, but from an admin team perspective, I mean, you guys deal with issues every day probably, some larger than others. But your protocols and procedures, does any of that change besides the required documentation and record keeping, everything that's in here? But like when you're dealing with an issue management, does that change protocol at all?
It just loops in myself or Chantel as the coordinator and kind of the keeper of all the documentation. But, I mean, our administrative team is already excellent in terms of their investigative skills and managing issues.
And you've dealt with race, you've dealt with gender identity, you've dealt with a lot of this already.
Yeah, it's not new for us. It's just more words on a piece of paper to tell me exactly what paperwork I need to keep and how long I need to keep it, and that there's timelines in place. We can't just have an undefined amount of time to investigate a particular situation.
And the other, to further, Mike, what you're asking, it also is that it comes before a board so that the community, employees, and students, families know that it exists, and that although we already do put that we have Title IX officers on our website, it now is just mandated. All school districts have to do that. Okay. So not only do we have to just have it in policy, and what you'll see in policy before we, on the other one, and Pat, you pointed it out, we specifically named that it was Sandy and Chantel up through all behaviors and up through July 31st. Moving forward, we say it's the Director of Student Services and HR, so that if the people change, you don't have to come back for the technical changes. However, on our website, we will specifically name that it's Sandy and Chantel, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, do you have
I was just going to say the bottom line is to prevent, to ameliorate any possibility of this kind of thing occurring in our buildings, and to just be aware, right? I mean, we just want people to feel comfortable and safe coming to school and coming to work and being treated with respect, regardless of anything, right?
And normally we would have a 2 policy here reading, and Pat, you already brought this up, and I'm in line with this, with the comments made earlier. You know, given the short deadline of August 1st, shouldn't necessarily dictate a decision, but I feel like I've, from my own personal perspective, done enough homework and research on this that I'm comfortable passing it with the one reading tonight, knowing that, you know, it looks good. I know there's a lot of things that kind of circulate on social media and everything, but at the end of the day, this is a policy that if we don't do, we're going to be out of compliance with the federal government, and we are a government institution that we are required to be following all of the federal laws and state laws that are in the books, and this is one of them. It feels a little bit like COVID, where we're getting a mandate that comes down, and nobody wants to relive that. But it's the same type of. We're not the court. We're not the jury. We're a school district that is here to. Teach kids and provide safe spaces for everybody, including employees and everybody. So, yes, it took me a little while to come around to it, but I'm good with trying to approve this in one reading. If everybody else is on board with it, then I have no complaints then.
Yeah, I'm okay. It's a new number, policy number, but essentially it is just replacing a previous policy for the same law. It's just an expanded law with new portions added that we default to Neola to get all of that information for us, because we can't afford to hire our own legal counsel to dig through all these documents. That's why we have
1,500 pages.
Yeah, that's why we employ someone like Neola to do that for us for our policies. So with where we're at and the additions that were made and the clarifying and the adding of different conditions, adding employees, I think I'm okay moving forward.
And ultimately, I trust our administration team to do the right thing. That's really why.
And I think we always have.
Yep.
Like, and they have. You guys have.
You guys have. You do a great job.
Yep.
All right. Anything else? Any other comments?
No.
Sandy, thank you very much. That was very informative, very helpful.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Chantel. Chantel was not able to be here because she is at her second training with regards to implementation of Title IX.
All right. So this is a motion for a one-time reading, Rick, and we have it in the motion. So if somebody wants to take this one, we can.
Yep, I move to approve the one-time reading per policy 0131.1 of updated Neola policy 2264 to go into effect August 1st, 2024 for the Prescott School District.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. And let's move on to item H. Consider the first reading of updated or new Neola school board policies.
Yes, these are all first readings. They were provided to you with links. What I'm going to put up on the board is nothing here. These are pretty vanilla and straightforward. You can see the summary with regards to looks like there are 13 that we're putting forward. Some of them are revised with regards to options, with regards to if you have a closed session, whether or not a board member can be attending in a virtual way. Obviously, there's some limitations when you're making disciplinary and need to be in for the presentation and things like that. The annual report authorizing kind of the duties of what our clerk and legal citations. We have different district-sponsored trips, specifically identifying how those are coming forward. We have the employment of co-curricular and extracurricular activities, controlled substances for licensed and non-licensed staff, and then also for students. Attendance is slightly revised. We have the administration of medication for emergency care. Anything that was with regards to being renumbered or revoked. For the food service, the main thing is that was added specifically was with regards to just that we can't discriminate based on, we have to have a non-discriminatory policy, and that's just being added. So for the most part, again, it's first reading because there are a few things that are a little bit more beyond just the technical. We do have more policies that'll be coming next month, but our administrative team needed a little bit more time to soak time and get back from vacations and knock off the rust to be able to address them. So you had an opportunity. I didn't receive any questions. Don't know if there's any specific ones you need to pop in.
I had one. Number 4, the controlled substance one, it's like just all crossed off, and I know it says renumbered. Is that, am I looking at the wrong thing?
Yeah, there's one that was rescinded.
So that was then just one
Totally
that's
gone.
completely gone and then
Okay.
being renumbered. Yep.
And renumbered,
To a different,
but it's the same
8601,
thing,
yeah.
just at a different number?
yes.
Okay. And then my other one that I had a question on was number 13, transportation by private vehicles for district-sponsored activities. And the only reason I had a question on this was, I guess I had a couple questions, but
Oh, that's a good one, yeah.
yeah. It's pulling up. I already had it up, but now it's pulling up again. Okay.
And I have it up on there too.
Oh,
Okay.
perfect.
Sorry about the light on that, but
No worries.
one of these days we will get room darkening black curtains. Right, Mr. Figgy?
So the caught my attention because right away it says parents, it's crossed off, including board members, may not transport their own children. And so I just wanted to I wanted to ask, I read further in there, so I just really, I feel comfortable with it. I just wanted to clarify it and make sure that people understood. That is struck out. It does say, because I think this happens quite often where we have away games, parents pick up their kids for whatever 1 million reasons and they come home with them. I know as a coach, I would rather everybody was together, but there's obviously things that are going on. And so our policy is kind of specific about that, I believe. And so one of the things that it brings up was that it had to be, in order to that in advance, it had to be approved by the district administrator if a student was going home in a private vehicle that wasn't like a school-sponsored one. Am I understanding that correct? And then who would that be? How's that? That seems like a lot.
Yes, so now that we have a new activities director, Matt Smith, I can bring forward for next month. However, I do want to point out that in the athletic handbook that is presented to all of our student athletes and families, there are protocols that talk about when we're leaving for a football game, when we're leaving for golf, that we travel as a team. You are right that at the end of a function, it is our preference that everybody, it's kind of like when 12 kids go into the river, we want 12 kids coming out. So when we transport them to an event, we want them coming back. And we were running into, so in the handbook, it tries to parallel that we understand that there are family circumstances and some of our students are in multiple events. And so it just has to be not a verbal, hey, I'm going with Rick and his son, Tom, home. It has to be pre-approved and in written form.
By the district administrator, it says.
Well, the district administrator can delegate.
Okay, and that's not clarified in here, so maybe that we should kind of clarify a process. Like I know oftentimes it's in writing to the coach and the coach keeps track of it and it goes to the district administrator eventually kind of thing. But whatever, it just says district administrator. And then the paragraph below says a person may be approved for the transportation of students in a private vehicle. So this is talking about anyone, right? So parents too in this situation. If the person is an employee of this board, which I'm not totally understanding of that, employee of this board, an approved volunteer, the parent of a student, the holder of a current valid license to operate the motor vehicle, and is at least 21 years of old. So it makes it, with that end, it makes it sound like all of those things have to apply and not just like, or you could be a parent or a district employee. It makes it sound like you gotta be both.
Okay.
Because it says and, not or. And then I'm going to say that 21 years of age too is a little bit of a concern. Why it was 18 before. And I would advocate for it to be 18 years old again or something, just because siblings and stuff like that. But that's more minor for me. I really would rather that end change to an or, because nobody's all of those things at once.
Sure.
Otherwise, those are just my questions and comments with the policies.
Okay. Just as a range, just a quick, since it's a first reading. Age, would you prefer just discussion about is 18 sufficient? Do you want to keep it at 21?
Why was it changed? Do we know?
I think it was supposed to be specifically looking for somebody that is not students that were driving, but it was basically a supervisor of a student that would be driving. And that's the proposal.
Yeah. I definitely understand that you don't want every kid jumping in the car of one of their friends and going home, but I look at it as like siblings driving a kid home.
What does, I was gonna say, what does the activities list? Does it list siblings as a?
I would have to defer, but we can get that information to you to make sure that the handbook is mirroring that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's.
I do feel like that historically our private vehicle is a stipulation for family members within a household.
Okay.
Okay.
Siblings.
Right, so that's where I'm like, if it's in there, then I'd like to see these two match. Okay.
Yes.
Just one of your questions you have on district administrator.
Yeah.
So in your policy 1000, I believe it is, the definition of district administrator, it says anywhere in any policy that is capitalized district administrator, that they also can be delegated.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
The actual wording is Its capitalization term, district administrator, implies the delegation of responsibilities to appropriate staff members.
Okay, awesome. That clarifies that.
So,
Yeah, because I was just thinking practically, that's,
So Courtney, could you just do a word find and capitalize every district administrator?
yeah, that's a good clarification.
Yeah.
Thank you.
so then that could be coaches, that could be, yep, okay, perfect. Thank you, Mike.
So where did we land with the 18 to 21 then?
I like the within the household sibling or
Okay.
something like that. I don't know how we clarify that best, but it's just like that does happen. Like, let's say they're going to a game and then they have a church event that night or something. Like, it just does happen.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yep, I'm good with it. Anybody else have any comments or questions about that one in particular?
See, when you don't have kids, these things just don't stand out to you.
Right.
I'm thinking like, oh my.
Tanya, is that all your laundry list of questions?
Yeah, it was just us two, really.
All right, Pat? Anything?
None. All right.
Vicki?
Tanya took care of my ones.
And I literally did go through these before, and I didn't really have any questions, so.
I think you still have to have a motion that you approve the first reading.
We do. So we can take a motion now.
I move to accept the first reading of the above noted policies with or without the following edits or considerations. These will come back next month for a second reading before the board. I think I have to restate that.
Yeah.
Okay. I move to accept the first reading of the above noted policies with the discussed edits and considerations. These will come back next month for a second reading before the board.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. We're done making decisions tonight. Let's move on to information and discussion. At least the important decisions there, I suppose. Teaching and learning. Michael?
Rick, I don't have my clicker.
All right.
Get off the trip, so.
Do you want me to use it?
If you have yours, yeah. I'll use yours.
Hot second. Thank you.
Good evening again, school board members. Just a quick update from the Teaching and Learning Office, which is busy this time of year, collecting assessment data as it's starting to come in now, and the state's finally starting to define. They went through an entire process for the forward exam, which impacts grades 3 through 8. They are redefining the categories from below basic, basic, proficient, advanced into different definitions that will also apply to the high school pre-ACT and ACT. We had a couple of our teachers actually from 4th and 5th grade attend a session down in Madison for 4 days where they helped guide how those would be scored. And we are anxiously awaiting our scores, mostly because the writing portion changed drastically. And I know from the people that attended, some questions, 75% of kids answered incorrectly, didn't answer the prompt the way they wanted them to answer them. The DPI said we are scoring every single writing. So it'll be interesting to see what we get out of our 6 or 7 different writing prompts that each grade level had. So, but we'll be doing that in August with our teacher leaders. So it's coming late July is what they tell us. So I'm not here to talk about that necessarily. What I am here to talk about is something that we started last month talking about, and really it's been an ongoing journey for the last 8 years that I've been in teaching and learning, is the disciplined pursuit of less but better. And how are we defining this school D? And we got to call it something better than school D. I'm starting to put visible learning. So becoming a visible learning district. So that way the learning, we can see it, you know what we're looking for, what it sounds like, and then sort of what does that feel for both students and staff. And the little graphic on the left there is something as we look at this progression of how are students interacting just as much with each other in the curriculum as they are with the teacher. So we're starting to, again, look at some of those emerging practices that are coming out of that. So one was that building thinking's classroom. And the building thinking classroom is, we'll watch a video momentarily here on it, but we have building representatives that went to a training with me earlier this month. We're looking at PD days actually really over the next 3 years of utilizing Collaboration Mondays and professional development days and in-service to train 100% of our staff into how do we become a thinking classroom. And as we learned at the training is, here are 14 practices that have been studied over the last 20 years and have proven to increase thinking, but there's more than those 14. And some of those we're starting to define ourselves. The other big thing of teaching and learning is that science of reading, structured literacy, and how students learn through structured literacy more than balanced literacy. Now it's kind of hard to see on the pictures here, but these are just some pictures. We went to Phoenix, Arizona in July, which if you ever have a chance to go to Phoenix, Arizona in July, pass on it.
Yeah, I've been there.
As you can see, it was very beautiful. The clouds were there. We were having a great time on our first day. We got to take some pictures. By the last day I have circled there, it's 113 degrees in the shade. We did everything we could to get out of the heat. The picture on the left there is hard to see, but that's me down in a silver mine, trying to find some cool. You can see we are doing some work in the meantime, but even the cacti gave up on this day and just tipped over because it was just so hot. So again, if you ever have that opportunity, pass on it. But the conference was great. You can see we have a photo here with us with Peter Lillenjall. He's the guy who wrote and studied for 20 years. 5 different continents, 400 different classrooms doing micro experiments about thinking and what practices get kids to think. It's different though, it's a change. It's going to be a change for our teachers in the way they teach. It's going to be a big change for our students in the way that they learn. With that, there's also going to come that educating our school board and educating our families on these changes. Because as we know, change is difficult, and everyone has opinion on what education is, because we've all sat in a seat at one point. So I'm just going to play a little video here, hopefully it works, of Peter talking 3 minutes about thinking classrooms. Oh, and Rick, you have to turn on your volume.
It's always fun.
Yeah. Pause.
Yeah, I'm guessing your thing is muted.
It's not.
Speakers on. As you can tell, we did not.
You can try it one more time. If not, I'll describe what he's talking about in these 3 minutes here.
Oh.
All right, I'll just talk about it. You can kind of see from the photos that are showing up. Basically, again, he was in 40 classrooms initially. This was his PhD project, 5 different continents. And what he saw was a lot of the same things. Classrooms looked the same. It didn't matter if you went into an elementary kindergarten classroom or a senior level classroom. The look of the room was the same. What the kids were doing was the same. There's this structure of, I do as the teacher, I'll demonstrate for you. Let's do it as a class, and then you do it on your own. And every lesson ended in the same way, where kids at the end were working on their own independently. Didn't matter again, K through 12 when he observed. And what he talks about is how, because he was on so many different continents, so many different schools, rural, suburban, low income, high income, private schools, is that there are institutional norms that we have in education. If you look at education 150 years ago when public education started, the rooms don't look all that much different. We talk about that sometimes in our own buildings, how the rooms, some of our buildings are near 100 years old. You can't change that room very much. But we can change how we interact with our students in that space. And that's really what this is about. So I was going to show this video just to show like the opportunities for change.
And what happens in
volume now,
classrooms
so now you got to cast.
has been true for a very long time. Public education has existed for about 150 years, since the end of the first industrial revolution. And when it was...
See if it keeps going.
All right, take 2.
We lose when we cast. Sorry, Michael.
Okay, so really he's talking about, again, it all looks the same. The photos were black and white back then, they're in color now. but it's the same thing. We have kids in rows or in pods, raising their hands to answer questions. It all looks the same. The systems and structures that we have in place get us the academic results that we have. And we have a lot of positive things of our academic results, overall results, closing gaps, things like that. However, as we continue to try to be the best at getting better, better for our students, better for our staff, better for our community, we still have a ways to go in getting to that visionary school, that visible learning school that we've been talking about. So sometimes I know we worry about, are we the early adopters? Are we the guinea pigs of these things? And that'll kind of be the narratives. I remember when illustrative math, 6 years ago in middle school, we implemented illustrative math. And that was a big change for our students, it's a big change for our families. And I know that because I talk to families about it. And how can you support your kid at school? And they're not getting homework home, or the homework they are getting, I can't help them with, because it's a different way of doing school. So sometimes we worry about that, and I'm sure that will come to the board members. But in a BTC, we're not early adopters. Again, these are 14 very well-tested, proven practices that get kids thinking and thinking longer in the classroom. And therefore, more learning, higher levels of understanding. So thinking classroom, that's our framework to take our student learning to that next level. But it does change the way we teach. It changes the way kids learn and participate in class. And like I started, this is not normal. This is not normal behavior to have a group of middle school kids mixed into groups they don't want to be in, but having discourse and discussing the learning that at hand. So it's going to be a learning curve for all of us. And that's why with this group, we've put together really over the next 3 years a professional development plan of how do we roll out. Some of these we're going to roll out very quickly. First 3 practices Peter talks about, you really need to rip the Band-Aid off and go with it. And it's going to feel like you're writing with your opposite hand for a while. But again, the more we do things, the more we can refine. So we have these toolkits, and these are the toolkits that we'll be rolling out over the next couple of years here. And we have a couple different cohorts. We have an elementary cohort, we have a secondary math cohort, and then a secondary really everyone else cohort. This was built around mathematics, but as he talks about, these are 14 practices that work in any classroom. And the good part is that some of these practices we already do in some of our classes. We just organically, we have figured out that this works better. And he talks about, he's not some genius that came up with these things. He just had the time to step out of the classroom and observe. And that's one thing that teachers do not get to do when you're in the classroom. You're so immersed in what's happening that you only see what kids want you to see. He talks about in his research, he found that 20% of the time, 20% of the kids are thinking. And he said they're all thinking, but they're not thinking at the level that will get them to be successful tomorrow. A lot of kids are mimicking. They're copying what the teacher's doing. They'll only be ever as good as what the teacher told them. But when you ask teachers say, that was a great lesson. Yeah, there was like 3 kids in the back that kind of were screwing around, but everyone else was engaged, on task, doing what they were supposed to be doing. They were doing stuff, but it wasn't thinking. So that's where his research led him down this road, and this is part of that journey that we're on with him. So that's our one big initiative. The other one, our Act 20, which is that early literacy. The state did announce the statewide screener, which will be Ames Web Plus. They actually got an email yesterday on just a little bit more details on it. But as you can see from the slide there, and maybe you can't see because of the sun, is that 4K will be screened twice a year, 5K through 3rd grade, 3 times a year. We have to implement by January of this upcoming year. It takes anywhere from 10 minutes at the low level to 20 minutes at the higher level in a one-on-one setting. So that's going to, again, we already do screenings. It's not really going to change a lot of what we do. Some of the things that now are codified is that within 10 days of that screening, we'll also do a diagnostic. We already do diagnostics. I can't guarantee you right now they're always within 10 days though, because depending on, and 10 days in this definition includes the weekends. So we have to work around that. And then, and we already do this, but no later than 15 days, we have to communicate the results to parents. And again, these are all practices that we're doing. They're just putting them, these are musts, that way everyone in the state's doing it. We have to develop an early literacy remediation plan handbook. That's something I am working on with a group of teachers at the elementary level of that handbook. Part of that, though, is a parent notification policy. So added to your list for August is a technical update to our already existing policy 213101 about reading instruction goals and kindergarten assessment. In there it talks about that we will communicate with parents. We just need to add within 15 days. So that'll be a technical approval that we'll need for that. Last time I talked to you about funding $50 million that was budgeted. Again, the Joint Finance Committee did not release it because of a line item veto, so they sued. There was a countersuit. The Supreme Court of Wisconsin did rule on a different one that sort of indicates what the Joint Finance Committee needs to do here, which is release the funds. But because they haven't been directed to, they haven't released it yet. But come this fall, schools across the state, we have to start implementing this without the resources that were promised. And that's where we're at.
All right.
Any questions for Michael? All right, thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Well done. We're going to move on to item B, PHS proposal for driver's ed program.
Going to have Josh Figge, our high school principal, come forward. This is somewhat tonight is a lot out of necessity. You hear a lot
Figured this was coming.
Mine's a little more simple than Joint Finance Committee or building thinking classrooms. It's really tough to see from up here. We should get some room darkening shades in here.
Great minds think alike.
Or like a shade just around the screen. So we're at a point where, as a district, we have to start to take a look at the long-term viability of our driver's education program. To put it into perspective, there are two major driving organizations that operate for a majority of schools in western Wisconsin. One of those is Northwoods Tech, and they serve 17 schools. The other one is the Safety and Respect Driving School. They serve 20 schools. So that's already 37 schools in our area that do not have localized school district-based driver's ed programs. Of the 10 schools that we compare ourselves to, so the Middle Border Conference schools, Big River schools like Hudson, River Falls, New Richmond, of the 10, only 3 of them have a local school district program, and 2 of those are actually not run through the school district, but they're run through the city in conjunction with their community education program. So we are relatively unique, is what I'm trying to say, in having maintained a driver's education program for this long. Right now, we're in a unique position because for the past few years, we have operated really on shoestring staffing for that program. It requires a special licensure. You need 12 credits. It takes about a year to gain that licensure. We have about 100 students per year that go through that program, and we really only have 3 licensed staff that undertake the program, but really only 2 are active, and one of those staff members just retired. In addition to that, I talked about Northwoods Tech and the Safety and Respect Driving School. They offer very competitive salaries. So they offer, on average, $10 more per hour to their instructors and their drivers than we as a school district do. So I hope we're starting to kind of characterize our problem. We will not have the ability, potentially, after September, to have a long-range driver's education program. Right now, Mr. Tomley, I've been meeting with him fairly regularly throughout the summer because he's doing a majority of our driver's education and behind-the-wheel driving. And he is telling me he can make it work in the short term, but in the long term, we need an alternative solution. So I've already begun conversations with Northwoods Technical College. That was at the suggestion of Mr. Barch and Mr. Tomley, our 2 instructors, because Mr. Tomley already works for them part-time, and Mr. Barch has expressed interest in working for them. He has an application in. So what you see in front of you is kind of our current reality, our proposal in looking at an external partner to start to be able to offer driver's education, still within our district, but not through the school district. And there are some things that would not change at all, and you can kind of see that whether there's a significant change. And then there are some things that we really seriously would need to consider with this change. And the biggest one is that we run driver's education, the theory classroom, through our summer school programming. And that represents a fairly significant amount of FTE funding that we get for that program. I've met with Dr. Spikuza and Mr. Kosmolsky, and so we have some ideas about how we could still maintain summer school funding by investing in our students' cost of those classes, but it depends on who we partner with, and it depends on whether the school board wants to make that investment in the front end.
Mr. Figge, do we right now currently, I mean, it's a zero cost, the course, the theory course is a zero cost to families. Do we essentially pay for that right now for kids, or is it?
In a way, we pay our staff members. We don't charge money because you can't charge for a summer school course. And it's a good question about funding. So currently, our program for families and students is $280. If you look at all surrounding districts, the districts who are going through external programs pay an average of $400. And the districts that are still maintaining it within district are paying an average of $375. So our $280 is the cheapest that you will find in all the Western Wisconsin schools that I looked at. So we're really just trying to update you on what we're doing, and that we might have some significant decisions to make in the future. We have not gotten confirmation from Northwoods that they can partner with us yet. I've reached out to the Safety and Respect Driving School to see if that's a possibility, but we will have to wait on more details from each one of those programs.
And Josh, can you explain a little bit of, you've explored trying to partner, but there's also some territorial and regulations that we have to navigate as well.
Yes. Wisconsin's technical schools they have territories. So we are in CVTC's territories. So any of our students that take courses have to go through CVTC. We are not partnered with Northwood Tech. CVTC does not offer driver's education. So we can't go to CVTC, our partner, who we're in their territory, and find a solution. So I'm trying to work right now between Northwood Tech and CVTC if CVTC will release us from our obligations to go through them for this one non-compete program to allow us to partner with Northwoods Technical College. Since it's the summer and most people are taking cycles of vacations or aren't in the office on consistent hours like they are during the school year, it's been tough to capture the people who can help us make decisions.
I mean, do we have an inkling, or do we think that CVTC, I mean, obviously there's other schools in our area that are using other places and have the same agreement with CVTC. Are we expecting any pushback? It's not something they offer. Is it just a matter of, yep, okay, if we offer it, you need to come to us sort of thing?
Potentially. I don't want to speak for them. All of the schools in CVTC's territory are going through the Safety and Respect Driving School.
Okay.
So really it's a lot of our Eau Claire schools, basically following 94 and south.
Okay.
And then anyone Hudson 94 north is Northwoods Tech.
Yep.
Our preference is Northwoods Tech for two reasons. Number one, they're an accredited technical college, which they're looking out for the best interest of their students. They're used to working with students. They've partnered with a number of districts, and every school district I've reached out to has had an extremely positive experience. The other thing is both of our instructors are already partnering with them, and so it would make a very seamless transition. Our students wouldn't see, and our families wouldn't see any difference.
And that's what I was going to ask. I'm like, if we've got our two instructors, one is already there, the other is looking to go there, then it's just semantics. It doesn't look different. It's just on paper it's different, but physically to kids, it's not going to be any different.
Correct.
Okay.
My hope, and this is only a hope, fingers and toes crossed, we've always had a really good partnership with CVTC and their K through 12 coordinator. I would be very surprised if she was opposed to this, but this went up to Northwood Tech's president, and he was the one that said that they will not make any moves to violate any agreements unless CVTC reaches out to them.
All right. So we wait.
So we would.
Okay.
Rick, am I okay to talk about how we believe we would potentially be able to keep the cost low for families and maintain district funding this summer?
Real quick, so if, is Mr. Tomley and Mr. Barch, would they still operate locally? Is that?
Pardon?
So, Mr. Tomley and Mr. Barch, Northwoods employees potentially, would operate here locally?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
we would still
our students
offer the
aren't going
classroom.
anywhere else, we're still here in this space?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. The only difference that they would see is Northwood Tech would buy us a brand-new vehicle and operate all of the paperwork and permitting through their portal.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. I know one of the concerns, and it's one of our concerns always, is shifting a cost onto families. So I told you, all of these other schools, the average is $400 for a lot of these schools. We're currently charging our students $280. Part of the cost of that average $400 is for the classroom, the theory classroom. It is possible, whether we go through Northwoods Tech or the Safety and Respect Driving School or potentially another, that we could invest in paying for each student's theory classroom if they take it in the summer, much like we invest in their online courses anyway. And we would still be able to count those students for summer school. It would drive down the cost, so students and their families shouldn't see any sort of increase. And in fact, at Northwoods, they'd see a $5 decrease in their overall cost. And we would still be able to have our cake and eat it too.
Because it's not run through our school district, but it would be, are we still considering it summer programming then, because there's no cost? Then could kids outside of our district enroll within our class offering, because it's not really through us, and then we would have that enrollment?
We
wouldn't get funding for it, yeah.
So that's something
they
you're
still have to
thinking
be
about?
within our district boundaries
Okay.
in order to
Do and their summer school programming.
Correct.
Good try.
I was just curious, because I know it is a struggle for
One
these
of the
programs,
things, though,
yeah.
that Michael and I looked at or have been exploring is right now students are taking a classroom version. It's face-to-face, your kids took it. When you do that, you get an hour-by-hour count. So it's 30 hours, you get funded for 30 hours. In an online class setting, you get funded per credit, which is significantly higher. So if we were to offer online summer school driver's education, we would actually see an increase in the amount of FTEs that we were gaining, which could potentially offset some of the cost in investing in this type of program.
How long?
I got a math question.
I was just going to say, how long, what are you thinking for the rollout for this? Is this like something next?
That's a good question. It depends on who we partner with. Talking with Mr. Tomley and Northwoods, the ideal right now would be kind of a 3 or 4 month phase in between August to December. We have some students who they're currently paid up with us. They're partway through their 12 hours driving behind the wheel. And behind the wheel is really what's difficult for us. It takes an inordinate amount of hours for the staff members we have. So we would use August, September, October, November to finish up the current slate of students. Any students who are currently taking the classroom portion and haven't started their behind the wheel yet would then phase into Northwoods behind the wheel, which really wouldn't be a whole lot of difference for them. For us, it would be trying to figure out the finances. If they paid us for behind the wheel, we would then have to pay Northwoods or Safety Driving School that money that they paid. Good question.
Pat?
Couple math that maybe you know, maybe don't. So if we were to get funded for the credit, okay, what's that additive amount versus if we don't, right, and we lose the students, what do we lose in state funding if this goes away?
What do we figure it out as? Right now, we're going to lose about $72,000 a year.
In funding if we don't do this?
Enrollment.
If we don't do it.
Okay. So maybe
if we
PHS math, be careful with that, but so at 125
That's really good, Michael,
at $125
Yep.
right, at 100 students a year, $12,500 is a heck of a lot lower than 72,000. Plus then you mix in all the other potential upside. It sounds like a super no-brainer.
Correct.
Okay.
That's if you just go with the straight classroom hours.
Right.
So now if you make it online and we're using our instructors, it increases significantly.
Couple points of clarification, though. The piece at which we would be paying would be for anybody that's taking it during the summer school. You can access online classes anytime, so that's a benefit of these programs, but there's no way we could capture any return on investment. So this would be specific to anybody that enrolls in the summer school theory. The second piece that's really important for, I think, the board and then for our community is we've hit a point where we've hit the fork in the road and we honestly can't sustain this program. We don't have the ability to recruit or compete at the driver's level. Also, we are, if you think about the priorities that and the rubric you use, it's a program that we provide that isn't required of the Prescott Public Schools and isn't specific to our mission and vision. We want and have been able to do it, but we're basically evolving out of it. And so there's costs of leasing a car, maintaining that car that goes away. And so there are some additional cost savings, but we're not going to be able to sustain it. We're hoping to try to have a soft landing, but it is possible that it implodes and people won't have the ability to run it through us, right? It still would be something we'll pursue, but we may not have a program heading into past early fall.
So we'll get an update on this sometime in the fall, I'm guessing.
We hope
My goal would be to come in August with
When people are back from vacation.
a solid proposal.
All right.
So can I just have a clarifying question, because you used a lot of, not nice words, but like implodes a little. But, okay, so you're saying the kids that are currently in there, because we have a whole group of kids that are in there right now, they potentially could not be able to do, if we can't get this figured out, behind the wheel would be a
speaking
little
with
off?
Mr. Tomley, we will have the ability and a plan to finish out the kids who are currently
That are currently in the, like,
No.
summer school class, right?
Clarification there, though. I heard you say that have started the behind the wheel.
The behind the wheel.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to make this all about me, but my specific situation probably is one is a question and people will have. My daughter didn't take it this summer. She took it last summer, but because her birthday is in May, they haven't caught up to her driver's ed, so she doesn't begin, she's supposed to begin in the next month or two, the behind the wheel. So she's gonna be, I am worried she'll be in this middle gray area where she won't be able to get in there, but we'll have a wait to get in until this, and I'm not sure she would get all of her hours in, I would worry about. So that would be a question, is like the kids from the summer before, because that's where my daughter is.
Speaking with Mr. Tomley today, he said his goal is everybody who's in that situation will be offered the opportunity to start by mid-August. And he's really, his calendar's like...
Yeah, so I shouldn't reach out to him quite yet, but...
No, I would reach out to him, because he had somebody else who was asking to reach out, and he said, have them reach out to me directly.
Because I do think there's that kind of gray late birthday group that a year and a half ago, at this point, they took the class, but they haven't started behind the wheel. Yeah, okay.
Because we currently have two, you said we had 3 people, 1 left, so we have 2 that right now could do behind the wheel, technically?
We technically have 2, but it's really primarily Mr. Tomley that's doing behind the wheel. Mr. Barch could reconnect with us after his...
He has to have 75 days removed from the district because of a retirement.
Right.
And
but at
if
the
he
same
gets
time,
hired, there's no expectation. If he gets hired and is making more money, I don't know why he would come.
So.
When I understand moving forward, we can't, I understand that, but there's an entire class of people that are currently in this, so it would suck if they couldn't finish that. And I would be remiss to say one of my kids, so that's kind of.
That's why we're trying to figure this out.
That's why we're trying to figure this out.
You would still have time, like, you would still have that, like, year time to kind of get there for birthdays. I think it's some of the kids that their birthdays are creeping up, but it's just backlogged. And that's the reality of it, too. I totally get it. They're really backlogged. That's the area, the kids, which happen to be my daughter, but that is that gray area where they might get caught up in the bubble, have to pause for a couple months, and then might not get it in. That's the group I'm mostly worried about. Otherwise, I believe, that it's going to come here, it's going to be the same same people, you still have almost a year, probably till birthdays, to get that figured out, but.
Yeah, and one of the other, I guess, last benefits is it is possible that through Northwoods or another external partner, we would be able to increase the amount of
Yeah,
drivers.
sure.
So that wouldn't be the same people,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you might get in to drive sooner and get your hours in faster, so.
Thanks, Josh.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Let's move on, summer construction updates.
If you look around the 3 buildings, you can see a lot of fences, a lot of work. By the end of next week, the roof over at 1220, the middle school, will be complete. You should see a crane over by the gymnasium coming up at the end of this week. That'll be the last section, and then they'll be moving across the way to 505 Campbell at Malone. With regards to the front entrance, the drywall and taping is going up in the new office. You see the new windows have been put in place, and for the most part, everything is still on time. We are still on budget, and we are looking at the first walkthroughs the week of August 12th. We are looking at and partnering with Market & Johnson and our architects, specifically for Malone Elementary, to have an open house, because that's the one that will have the most physical changes, because everything else has been infrastructure.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure that the community can see kind of the new safety protocols that are in place and the new front office and the new entrance. So that is in place, and then all buildings are, and every principal is working on things that will be partnering with communities and different groups for the month of September and October.
Any questions from the board here?
No, I'm just happy to hear that we're do an open house. That was something I had asked for previously, and granted, there was really not a whole lot to look at, except, I mean, we took care of a lot of stuff last summer, but it was things that, it was flooring. It was, it might be interesting especially for people to see the classrooms without any of the chemistry stuff anymore. Like, that might be crazy to see those rooms, the
Exactly.
old fax room, all of that sort of stuff. So it's nice to know that we're going to do that for the community that supported this maintenance. So.
All right, let's move on to varsity track.
Varsity track, just wanted to let you know that we have the company, Fisher, out of Iowa. They are scheduled to begin work July 29th, so it's a Monday. We are going to be protecting and fixing some of the cracks with regards to the base foundation. We did have drones that flew over the track to record where all of the repairs are taking place. Obviously, the warranty is based on the top part, and it wouldn't be based on anything if the foundation is not up to standard. We're happy with Fisher with regards to their plan. As Mike Koika updated you yesterday, this is something that we have done previously. We believe the rest of the foundation is in good shape. Once that is done, they'll begin putting the final surface on, the polymer. Both our coaches have participated. They're also updating some of the striping for the long jump and high jump pits, and we should be able to have that work completed and not interfere with some of the fall activities. There is one asterisk, and that would be the first home football game. We do have contingency plans if the weather doesn't cooperate, and Matt Smith will be working with Mike Koika and Market & Johnson to make sure that we have alternate plans in place, and then we'll have a nice varsity track and kick off to the football season at the beginning of the season, beginning of the school year in September.
Questions, anyone?
Nope.
Or comments?
Nope.
All right, let's get going on the last one here, budget and audit updates.
Well, we saved the best for last, so come on, Sue.
Could have put this right at the beginning, maybe.
Kara Klatt, we're going to meet at the middle table. We had a work session, and so we are going to give you an update with regards to the work session. If we could, Kara, if you want to just quickly introduce yourself at the microphone. Kara Klatt is our new acting director, finance coordinator. You all know Sue, who is retiring but is working to finish up the audit, and will continue to help us transition with the Baird and Skyward models. You want to just take a minute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Kara Klatt. I'm finance coordinator with Prescott School District, and I've been here approximately 6 weeks full-time now. So still catching on to the a little bit. The high wire. Are you good there?
I do.
And it looks like they turned down the lights a little bit.
This first one right here.
All right.
This one right here.
So, oh, that's right.
Update for July, yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
And then it's the first one. This one has reductions and expenses included in it. Perfect.
All right. So for the board, this is just kind of a reminder, and what I wanted to do is just thank the finance department is bigger than the two women sitting to my left. But throughout the summer, we are presenting to you what typically is presented in September, and it is now middle of July. We are coming out of a very challenging situation since April 2nd of a non-supported referendum where we, as a district, had to reduce over $1 million through reductions. There will be an article coming out that will be following up from Mike Matzik's board president update with regards to what has changed. We'll talk about the ongoing challenges that are in place with regards to educational funding. Specifically, federal funding has decreased for the Prescott Public Schools by 50%. Mental health funding last year and this year have been cut by 50%, mainly because of how the formula worked and small schools were not held harmless. And yet we are investing in more mental health screening and services to meet the needs of our families and students. In addition, we are seeing a $325 increase per pupil, and so that does provide us with a little bit of additional revenue. This is just an abbreviated version that is given to the electorate. It would be published in the Pierce County Journal, and it breaks out all of the different funds. Today we are here specifically to talk with the board about Fund 10. As you know, we have always had, and by statute, have to report out 3 years of information with regards to our finances. The 22-23 school year is the first column. At the very top, it starts with fund balance. So what is the beginning fund balance and end fund balance? As our school board knows, we have board policy with regards to some criteria in which we have to meet. Our safe harbor, in order for us to meet our bills and have enough ability not to take short-term loans in the time from November to January, requires us to hit a target of $4.8 million or above to be able to meet salary. And so that is a 4-month kind of rule. We also never want to fall below 2 million, and obviously anytime you do that, we then now have to stop paying our invoices, stop paying our providers, as well as making other additional cuts that are not kind. In 22-23, you can see that if you go down to total revenue, we received $17.7 million, and we had expenditures of $18.3 million. That was the first time we had run an unbalanced budget in a number of years. A lot of that is related to COVID and some of the federal funding that went away, and then some of the additional cuts. And it was the first year of the biennium in which we knew and had planned for $650 per pupil and ended up with $325. If you go to the middle year, this is with regards to end of year, June reporting, right, Sue? Yep. Okay, so these are different, they're unaudited, and the audit begins on July 26th?
Face-to-face audit, 29th.
Okay, 29th.
It's already in progress.
And so they're uploading information to Clifton Larson Allen. Sue will continue to make sure that the audit goes smoothly as she transitions towards her retirement. So these are updated numbers. The ending fund balance is $5.2 million. The significance of this is that we were projected in our estimates to be at $4.8 million. So in April 2nd, based on the promise to the community is that we were going to make cuts throughout the year. We started at this time, August 2023, with a known deficit of $1.2 million. We were able to shave throughout the year over $600,000. Yes, we lost money. We did deficit spend, but it is what I would say a pretty darn good feat to be able to do that within the year, and it was based on people willing to step up, fill in, and have spaces that remained open. Unfortunately, we said that we would make those cuts and would still require additional funds from our local community because we were not getting it from the state and we were not going to see it in the federal government. That led us to put and propose funding from the local community at $1.2 million. That was not supported, and that executed from April 2nd through April 30th the need to release and reduce our personnel that were licensed and then continue to work on efficiencies. You saw the transportation reductions that we had promised with regards to consolidating routes, not buying a bus, reducing drivers. Food service has reduced and prepaid. Nicole gave you a presentation on that, and we also are raising fees for families. What we do have is the total revenue last year came in at slightly higher than projected, but not dramatically, at 17 million, and we had expenses, the bottom line, 17.6 million. But what I am proud to say is we are going to be coming to the board and to our community with a balanced budget. So based on the work that has been going on since the end of April, we have been able to identify that our revenue projection is basically flat. It'll come in at $17,010,000, and we have expenses of $17,010,000. And I'm going to turn and ask, kind of like a lawyer, how confident are you, Sue and Kara, with regards to those numbers with revenue generation, and what steps are taken in order to identify where our revenue comes from?
I'm confident in those numbers.
On a scale of 1 to 10.
We will have a balanced budget, and these numbers are pretty darn good. They really are.
I'm confident in the budget as well.
So these numbers are very similar to what you saw last night. We do have a worksheet that is, and what I just want to always tell people, this information, similar to what we'll do when we have the annual meeting that gets scheduled in September, so next month we'll be setting that date, is that these numbers will vary. It's based on, revenue is based on how many students are enrolled, and it's based on 3 years. 2 years are fixed because they've occurred, and now we'll take our enrollment in fall. We include FTEs that we talked about, full-time enrollment in summer school. Sarah Dusick just oversaw the summer school program. We added programming this year with theater. We have swimming lessons that are going on, and we added 1 additional day for return to learn. We believe that the information that we have is conservative effort, but it's based on unknowns that we won't know until September and October. Equalization aid does not come in and identified from the state until October. The first quarter into a fiscal year is still an unknown variable. However, what I can say is these numbers will be different, but they won't vary any more than any other year. And the procedures and steps that were taken, I believe that we're confident that we will have a balanced budget. The most important thing for the board is that we were hoping that we would have had this information, and I remember, Pat, you asked us last month, will we be able to have scenarios? And I said, I don't know if we can't. So it was a double negative, right?
Yeah.
We had to. And so there has been a lot of work going, and we're going to give you the first view. We had some sloppy copies. We focused specifically on our budget for 24-25 last night, and we've been able to meet with Baird today, and we've been able to have another 24 hours to proof this information. It's important to let you know, to the board and to our faculty, that the increases in salary that traditionally occur for teachers that would have a step and lane advancement, for our hourly workers to advance on the matrix, and then for anybody not on the scales to have a 2.5 increase in salaries is embedded and baked into these numbers. So we were hoping to have that as an agenda item. We weren't able to have the 24-hour notice. I do think that this is good news, and I will be advocating that the board seriously consider a one-item special meeting before August, if we can, to approve advancement on the salaries so that our payroll and HR can get the contracts done, we can get skyward, and nobody misses the bump in their pay. Any questions with regards to where we are in revenue and expenses for next year, and understanding that it did include salary advancement for our employees?
Anybody have any questions? I know we went through a lot of this last night. There's some differences in the numbers, but anybody got any questions?
No, but considering there was no one in the audience last night, I think I just want to repeat that, Rick, awesome job balancing the budget. I think that this is huge, so I think kudos are for your whole team over there. This was earlier, much earlier than normal, and we did this through really hard cuts. And so this didn't come easy. We went out, we said we had to make these cuts in order to balance the budget. I can see that we made the right amount of cuts, although hard, and we're able to have that balanced budget. So this is really important for us to have the rest of our conversation. So thank you, you guys are awesome.
Can I say one thing, and I don't want to steal any thunder? I think what's important about the balanced budget, though, while that is fantastic news, I think what you guys are going to show us, though, is that's still not sustainable over a certain period of time. So I think that's just important. Yes, there's going to be a presented balanced budget, but there's some work to do still to figure out a long-term solution.
Coming school year.
That's for this year, right?
Yeah.
And I think you're going to talk about that.
Nope, but I think it's important, and I appreciate just for people to understand is we told and we talked to the board and we talked to the community, you can't cut your way to excellence.
Yeah.
And we've delivered academics and being in the top in math, PSD math, you got to be proud of it. In reading our activities, we have award-winning theater, and we also have state championships in athletics. And I just want to remind people, if that's what you want to experience for Prescott Public Schools, the white knight is not coming from the federal government. We're at the end of biennium funding. And so I'm going to transition back to kind of baseline. What we projected previously, I just talked to you about that we had started a year ago, 12 months ago, with a $1.2 million deficit. We got it to $600,000. So when you look at these scenarios, these are the scenarios that we presented to all of you and to the community as we headed into a referendum. What we have are historical information that was audited. The blue is end of year. What's different for end of year in the blue is that we have transitioned from estimates, that was what a budget was in April, to now actuals, okay? And so what we have is, it starts with what is your membership? It shows that we did receive $325 per pupil increase. We get per pupil categorical aid through special education. Talks about salaries, and then it has our revenues and expenditures. Anything in red, left to right on these charts, means it's a deficit. The main things we want you to focus on the left-hand side is within the year. Did we have a surplus or a deficit? For the first 10 years, we did not run deficit budgets. We now have 2 years in a row of a deficit budget. But if you look out to budget year 24-25, that's the same information that we just showed you on the publication. It's 17 million within year, balanced budget, 0. Right? That's the good news. The fund balance, remember you have a policy of staying within safe harbor. You have a targeted policy of 4.8 million. We thought we were going to be at 4.8 million. A month ago you asked me, and I said, all I could say is I was highly confident it would be near or north of 5 million, and it comes in that we are at $5.2 million for our current fund balance. That's healthy, that's where it needs to be, and then at the end of next year, because it's a balanced budget, we would still be at $5.2 million. To the hard work that's gone on, the people behind me, it's not just the finance department, every single supervisor, every single principal has been able to meet with Kara and Sue. They have been able to look at their budgets. They have reduced 10 to 15% where they could. They have been able to get it back into Skyward and then also proof it. This is the first time we've been able to do that in my career, to be able to get those numbers to our administrators, departments, and principals and back. So we're confident about also the budget building for the year. Now we're going to move into 25-26. Why I have highlighted 325. 325 per pupil is consistent in every biennium. So biennium are when the legislature meets to set a 2-year budget. The next budget is set starting January 2025. The legislature historically has not gavelled out and provided the educational funding until July of the year that they're meeting. So that means until July 25, you won't know whether or not the 325 remains or if it's changed. Currently, it's highlighted because it exists only because of a line item veto of the governor, and it currently is in the court system being challenged. So it's precarious. There's a lot of things that are precarious, and so what we are suggesting is that, as Pat asked, you can see that our ability to make cuts to balance the budget automatically falls to be insufficient, even with a 325 increase the next year. We would already start deficit spending unless we make additional cuts. And all I would say is you can't cut to excellence. We've cut to the bone. I don't know how much or where we would cut elsewhere, but this is where now you start to see we fall also below our target policy. You can see that the next year would be a deficit of 900. Now we're at 3.6. What's the challenge of when we go below 4.8 million?
You only get paid quarterly, so when you're at the end of the quarter, you're pretty poor in the bank account. It gets really hard to pay your bills, to make your payrolls, until the next quarterly payment comes in from the state.
And when we talk about fund balance, is it actual cash in the bank?
No, the cash in the bank is usually, could be less, but it's your assets minus your liabilities is your fund balance.
Rick, can I just jump in here too? And we talk about this all the time, right? And you guys do an excellent job educating the community every August on the fund balance. And there's policy around why we have our fund balance set up to meet certain thresholds for this exact reason.
Yes.
And it's good to call out, and I just wanted to back you up because I think that's why we make decisions based on our fund balance at a certain level. So, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, and so what you see is this is without any referendum because it wasn't supported. We made over $1 million in reductions in expenses, and we're able to balance, but it's not going to be sufficient. And so now what we're able to do is walk you through scenarios that we believe we would have to consider in order to be able to stay viable. Put 31 here. It's going to be a third?
Third.
There we go. All right. Okay. So we went to the community for $1.2 million. This is what it would look like, refined, based on everything that has changed, balancing the budget and making cuts. What you see is when you ask for a referendum in an academic year, you can see that it's highlighted, and it's highlighted once when it's recurring, because in future years it gets added to your base. Okay? There is the opportunity for 3 times that you could, if you want, to ask for an investment from the local community. That can happen in November at the presidential election, November 5th. It can happen in February, and it can happen in April. We'll talk a little bit about timing and what the importance and some of the changes of that. By asking for a referendum, if it's asked for in November, it then would hit for the taxes within that academic year, and those taxes are paid and arrive to the district in January, February. Okay. And those taxes from a referendum like that, they also get earmarked. And where do those dollars have to go to first?
You have to fund your debt first, to fund 38 and 39 have to come out first, and your fund 80. Your community ed, your community rec have to come out of the tax dollars first. If there's anything left, Fund 10 gets it.
And a $1.2 million levy, just what do we currently pay for Fund 39 on principal and interest within a year?
Fund 39 is just under 3.8 million, and then Fund 38 is smaller.
So those first dollars in automatically disappear because they have to fund previously voter-approved referendum, right? And those are the investments for infrastructure and things like that. Yeah.
I believe you said that February 25 date, we would still be able to encumber those funds if approved.
November.
It has to be November to be able to collect in February.
Correct.
Got it. For this year.
For this year.
Got it. Okay.
If we ask in February, which is an option, an election date, the actual revenue, if it's supported, would not hit till the next year.
The next February.
So a difference of 3 months when you ask your question will differ by 12 months when the actual dollars are received by the district.
Yep, okay.
Okay?
You can only ask the question twice a year.
Within a calendar year.
There's 3 elections.
Right.
So we could ask in November, and then we could ask.
So if you look at the 1.2 million, that if supported, then it gets added into your revenue. So then you can see our balanced budget would be from $17,010,000. You would add the 1.2 million, meaning that we wouldn't know until November 5th, but if it was supported, our new revenue stream, not actual dollars in-house, would adjust to $18.2 million. Unless we spend some of it, and Sue just told you about how first money in on tax dollars have to cover your debt and principal and Fund 80, it's not like you have $1.2 million to automatically use. We did talk a little bit about some things about what we would start to prioritize of bringing back into the district what processes we would use, and they would be reverse processes of how we prioritize making cuts. So there are the arts, there are the activities, there are academics that we want to make sure that are equitable, and we would have processes in place. The benefit of this is that prior to April 2nd, if we didn't do anything and we didn't have a referendum, we would have been insolvent by the year 2027. Now, if we just go up.
Hey, Rick, can I just check in on that one? When you say insolvent, do you mean is like at a zero balance for fund balance?
Technically. Correct. We would have been out of money. Right? So this was what we were faced with is that our fund balance, surplus, and then fund balance, by the year 2027, we would have had zero money in our fund balance. We would no longer be able to pay salaries, and we no longer would be able to pay invoices. That was what we were headed into had we not made cuts.
Right, okay, that's, I wanted to be clear on that. Okay, so prior to making the cuts, this is what it would have looked like. Now, the previous slide above that one is with the cuts, here's where it would look. Not the 1.2 million, but the zero, the very first one.
Yeah, that's where I missed the.
Because I think that was the thing that we kind of were confused on.
Yep.
Where, okay.
Especially last night, and so this is what we wanted to say is, by the efforts that unfortunately we were faced with, we have changed the trajectory.
Yep.
It's just not going to be sufficient. But, right? But now we bought ourselves some time.
Yes.
Okay?
Yep.
And I think that was a good question that was asked, and we now said, by those cuts, it should have shown up on the forecast, and it is showing up on the forecast if you look at where we have the balanced budget.
And then to Pat's point, yes, we cut, but it's not going to be enough because our expenses outpace the revenue coming in from the state.
That's correct.
On a consistent basis, just because of the nature of our business. We're a people company. We have to give raises and benefits. It's just the way it is.
So the outlook here is if you were to still stay with 1.2, you see that we don't deficit spend until 27, 28. But what is different,
Stay solvent.
we stay solvent, and the fund balance, we are above safe harbor, which is the 4.8. Okay? Now, you then challenged us to say, what if, and we could go higher, but we thought we have that information. You asked us to say, could we go lower?
Can I ask a couple of questions before we slide? Because just for clarification, first of all, fund balance, how is it calculated again? Is it off of our total expenditures? Is it a percentage or?
It's the cumulative.
It's the assets, your cash, your capital, your accounts receivable.
Yep, it's a certain
minus your
percentage.
liabilities, which is what you owe for, mostly for your accounts payable or your payroll benefits.
Yep.
So assets minus liabilities is your fund balance, and then you take your revenue minus your expense and add it to that.
So that kind of goes to my question here. As our expenses increase, won't that change our threshold of our fund balance?
Yes.
So we're saying 4.8, but really as we're increasing,
It's gonna change.
it's going to be closer to
And that's
that.
our minimum safe harbor. You have 3 different levels. of
But
it.
every year, it's going to go up a little bit.
It's gonna change a
Yeah.
little.
Can I?
Yeah.
Ask your next question, but now I'm just prepping them, because we wanted to show you just a 30-second tutorial about the backbones of what produces this.
Yeah.
But it goes to your point about
Yeah.
4.8 is okay now, but in the future,
Right.
4.8 won't be sufficient.
And that's kind of I wanted to just clarify, as we're projecting 5 years down the road, 5 school years down the road, that 4.8 isn't the same number that we need in there anymore. It's going to be closer to 5, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, and I just wanted to clarify that. And then, as I notice our expenditures increase every year, and I just wanted to clarify that that's related to inflation and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
That you're building that in.
We
Well-
put a nominal inflation factor in.
But we also believe that we have to invest in our staff. And
Okay, so is that a 2.5% increase plus inflation every year? Okay, and I just wanted to double check and make sure that that aligns with my thinking there. Okay, thank you.
All right, so, but
And if you want to see it, we had a snip to show
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I bet.
We
I'm hoping I can cast.
That white again.
Well, that would be bad.
we didn't try it.
When you guys know, can you cast your hard drive?
It had to be plugged in over there last time.
I'm using Google Cast.
Why is it just go to the podium and plug in with HDMI?
Yes. Yeah, my HDMI is broken. But, so you can, you still have to use it.
Yeah.
We can't replace it.
Put him on the playlist.
So then the other thing on that chart that hasn't changed or shifted is we've got a static number for pupils, which we know is not the case.
Yeah. Because that's volatile, you never know.
And that's the thing, I mean, up or down, but I mean, we've consistently been going down, so.
That's a lot to think about.
Actually, looks like they got it increasing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is just one section of about 1,000 lines. But you can see, I picked
That's
capital.
not true.
You can see where we did not budget. Here, this is the current what we spent. We're not budgeting a vehicle purchase. We reduced the budget for a replacement of old, too far away. Yes, this one was building. You know, we reduced the technology capital purchases. Over here, you can go in and adjust the percents. So when you're in the payroll section, we have a percent in there, and it carries it out all the columns across. So we went in and manipulated. For utilities, I think we put in a 5% for gas and electricity.
So a couple things we don't want to belabor them. I don't want to tell you how a watch was made, right? But you want to know the time. But this is, going back to last night, one of the things that, as we go through this, is we have to put in, if we're going to do salary increases, we put that in across time, and then it just replicates it out. Things like, we follow information, we work with Baird, we work with other districts, we try to identify how is healthcare rates changing. We have a 9% cap, so we put the 9% in if it comes in under. But those are all things that the finance team is working on. Not only is it the budget, but then it's talking about predicting based on inflation or changes in sectors to put that information in. So last night we did find that you had asked, I think, we had a column that we put something in and it just went out into infinity, and that's what we were able to find and
It
work
was
with.
a one-off expense that was kind of big. One of them in a different fund was the credit card fees that Nicole just spoke about, how she eliminated them. Well, it was a $17,000 expense, which was a 200% increase, and then it took that and times it by 200%, and then 200%, and 200% across all the years. It was a really big number by the end. So we went in and searched all those out today.
Okay.
Josh, can we switch back to the casting?
Did I just unplug?
That makes sense. Thank you.
in my opinion, that would have been the no-brainer too. We would have had enough time to cover the year, and then you're gonna say, well, it's not the presidential, but I think it's still 66%.
Okay. So one of the things that we then worked on is what would, if we were to step it down 200,000, would we, what would it look like? So you can see at the surplus, it would increase if it's approved within the academic year. Our revenue would go up from 17,010,000 to 18. You can see that we run a surplus within the year through the year 2027. It's identical to the year when we start running a deficit at 1.2, just the magnitude's bigger. It now is 300,000 versus 98, right? So it's 100,000 versus 300,000. We did look at going lower than that, but we were worried about two things. You can see that either at $1 million or 1.2, the fund balance does stay within the current safe harbor. The challenge would be what other decisions might the board be considering, and whether or not, as you can see, the within year surplus is higher at the beginning, and then it drops off dramatically. And so one of the things, it's kind of like a reverse arm loan, right, where you have a huge payment at the end. Here you have a lot of money up front, and then it kind of dwindles away. This is because it's about operating, and it's really hard. No other district. A $17 million expense is similar to the year 2022, or 2021 school year. That's 4 years ago, and we're still excelling. That's, I think, commendable, but it's also on the backs of many personnel. So that's where we're at, and I don't think we can go below that.
Mechanical question quick on the forecast tool. When we start the deficit line, right? In the example we're looking at is a deficit of 295, but then there's a fund balance of 634. Does the fund balance already take into account covering that deficit, or should we be doing our own math?
No, it's accumulating.
Nope, but is it also paying for it? So like, for example.
So, or in reality, let's use round number. We got a $300,000 deficit. We're 6.3 deal. Is it really 6 million? Because we got to cover the 3 million in deficit.
No, it's out already.
It's already out. Okay, all right. I just wanted to understand that.
It's like the ending balance.
Okay, thank you.
The beginning balance is in the column before.
But
So
basically,
even-
you're approving, because we can't spend fund balance without your.
We would have to. come
Correct.
back
We'd have to
and-
approve it. Yeah. Okay.
But looking at that, we would be able to stay, I mean, up until that, like the 28-29 school year, we're able to still have the fund balance what we need it to be at.
Yeah.
And operating with the 1 million.
Prove that when you look at the 5.88, how we ended
Yeah.
last year, and then we're gonna take 616 off of it to get to the 5.2.
Yeah.
And it just goes like that all over.
This looks a lot better than last night.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say.
Well, except for-
Because that was like a year or two. And this, I'm glad we looked at that again, because this seems much more like, okay, this makes more sense here. Yeah,
There
okay.
are literally hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
formulas in this.
Yeah.
And it's probably
For sure.
30 tabs wide.
Yeah.
It's a huge
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
But we did have Baird look at it today. We'd already found what we thought.
Yeah.
And we had Baird
Yeah.
verify that there was nothing else going on.
Well, and I could tell from your confidence rating compared to last night to today that it increased significantly, so that was good too. Yeah.
A couple other things I wanted to just say is, again, it's a forecast model, right? So the further out you go, the less confident you can be, because there's so many other
Yep,
factors.
the 325 could change.
But it's the best tool that we've ever had. I think it gives you and the community the ability to see multiple years out. And it now gets you the opportunity to start to discuss, one, do you believe there's a case that cutting wasn't sufficient and that you may have to ask for additional support from the local community? And I think that's worthy of a discussion. If you believe that there is the case that we have to have a local investment, then we have to start talking about there's only certain times that we can go and ask them. I would posit that April isn't viable, because by April, staff would already have been recruited or be leaving. And so I think you have a November and a February date that are available to you. And I guess I would start with, what questions do you have for Kara or Sue? Or what questions do you have for us with regards to whether or not there's a case that we are in need of some additional external but local support?
Can we take a short break?
We can, yeah, we can. I'll just gavel us out. We don't even need a motion, so
Yeah.
we're gonna take a short break.
I need,
Let's take one, we'll go for 5 minutes if we have, if we can. So 5-minute break, thank you. Okay, we're rolling again. Just for the record, we recessed for roughly about 5 minutes, and now we are back in session. So I think we left off kind of discussing this last forecast model. Rick, was there anything else that you had that you wanted to present, or where do you want to go with this right now? Because I think there's some questions probably.
I think put us back.
Maybe I'll just lead up to the one thing that this does not address right now is we haven't talked about what, if we go to referendum, what we would want to bring back or change. And we discussed a lot of that in the workshop last night, but do we want to go there now, or how do we want to move forward? Because this was kind of different information from last night.
What I guess I would start with is there enough evidence and information to suggest that the cuts aren't going to be sufficient and that you need some additional revenue? And right now it's not coming federal, and it's not coming from the legislature, because we're at a biennium that hasn't, the next time they'll even discuss it and have a decision won't be till July 2025.
So do we just want to go through and answer that first part of that question then, or what?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Do you want to start down here?
I might. So my observation, looking at the screen right now, is there a need? What the forecast is showing us is after this coming school year, right? If nothing is done, we start running a deficit immediately, and we drop below our 4.8 target per policy fund balance. So that's doing nothing. That's maintaining existing cuts. It's not adding anything back. What that means is, if we believe in that target fund balance, and I think we all do, we ran into it this year, right? So just cause for believing in it, that would require additional cuts either next year, or if we wanted to agree to, we're taking some risks there going at 4.5, within 2 years we would be making additional cuts to what has been made right now. We all know that those cuts take about a year to implement, so we'd be making decisions next year. That's without going to get anything. So that's my quick observation on this right now.
And I just want to piggyback on that, because when we went last April, we forecasted without the cuts, and we talked about this earlier tonight, but the forecast model that we looked at was, what if we do nothing? And where does that get us to? And that was that first sheet where we literally run out of fund balance in 26, 27. Now we're saying, because of the cuts, we bought some time, but that eventual cliff is pushed out a few years. But we're going to start deficit spending already next year. This is kind of that's a new sheet for us to implement the cuts. What does it look like now that we've implemented cuts? This is what it looks like. We didn't do this last fall.
So we start deficit funding deficit spending after this year, and basically based on the projection after 5 years, insolvency, right? So which is as bad as you get.
Yeah.
So my personal opinion is there's just cause to consider going back for referendum, or we need to start thinking about any cuts that would be beyond the bone, right? As you put it earlier, that we've already taken.
And I would add, one of the conversations we had last night, you brought up what would we bring back or not. work sessions are not decision-making sessions, but all of us, I heard, echoed the same priority of keeping our teachers. The other thing, that if we do this and we do not ask for another referendum, we don't ask for any other funding from our citizens, then that's the other option, is we cannot do an increase in teacher salary.
Correct.
So we could say that 2.5% no increase, we're not cutting. And that, I heard echoed from everybody here last night, that that's not what we want. Our priority is to keep our teachers, and if anything, increase that 2.5% down the road to stay more competitive with our following districts. So the way I look at it, Pat, is very similar to you. We told the community that we will cut, I think it was $600,000 out of the budget in good faith, but we also need this additional 1.2 in order to get us going. And then that 1.2 was reoccurring. So we can see really clearly that 1.2 balanced our budget. The 600 that we promised and the 1.2 balanced our budget for next year. We need to keep with that 1.2 in order to balance our budget following that. So not necessarily 1.2, but something. And so, yeah, I mean, my thoughts are, we have to do something. We can get through this year, that's it. So we can ask again if it gets voted down, and we can choose the numbers of conversation. If it gets voted down, then yet this year we're going to need to look at almost $700,000 more in cuts.
Any thoughts down here? I mean, I think it's much of the same, but you want to add anything? Helen?
I mean, the numbers are there. You worked really hard to get them. We've discussed it at length. I mean, in looking at the numbers and talking about it, there's no way that, in my mind, that we can't ask the question again. I think it would be, in my mind, it would be when do we go? Because, I mean, you continue to say we can't cut to excellence, which is true. We can't cut anymore. You can't ask the staff that we have now to do more with possibly less. That's not a winning district. So in my mind, it's kind of all unfortunately red, and it makes sure that it's telling me that we need to go for a referendum. You need to ask the question.
Vicki, anything else?
No, it's clear by the forecast that we need to ask again. We do need that extra funding. I am very hesitant to put any faith in the state legislature at this time, hoping that we get through the next biennium and we'd be okay with, if we got a referendum passed, if we got 1 million, we'd look okay for the next biennium, but then it starts, well, both actually, 1 million or 1.2 by 27, 28, which would be that second biennium. We're looking at being at deficit spending even with the ask of the 1 million or the 1.2. And we know enrollment is decreasing, and like I said, I don't want to put a bunch of faith in the legislature to increase funding or even increase it to a level that we know we need and that all districts need. I think as we're planning forward and we look at asking for a 1.2 or a $1 million referendum from the people in our district, I think we also need to somehow start planning ahead for what our district is going to look like. We know we're losing students. We've done readjustments with classrooms already. We need to, I think, consciously be looking at these things every year to make sure that we are not overspending or spending needlessly on things that we could possibly eliminate, do away with. The class sizes, with high school, you know what works, what doesn't work. We've made those adjustments. I think that needs to be an ongoing decision, because either way, 27, 28 school year doesn't look that great. And I don't want to continue to go back and ask for more money if we're not, as a board, trying to adjust spending on our end. And one of the things, it's been talked about before, and we've asked architects, we've looked at it. I think we need to kind of look forward on our end, and we've talked about the master planning of our district, and I think we really need to kind of accelerate that. What do we want it to look like? And is moving down to a 3 instructional building something that we maybe need to plan ahead for, so that maybe when we get to that 27, 28, if we get money for a referendum, we still know we're going to be in a situation, so maybe we still need to plan ahead for that sort of situation if we don't get that increased funding from the state. So I think for us as a board, and then as a community, I think we really need to just, I think, jumpstart that planning of our district and what it needs to look like.
I just wanted to say that I feel like with the 1 or the 1.2, I feel confident beyond the 28-29 school year. Because we have a fund balance, even with the 1 million. I think we need to do something at that point, but it buys us time. The reason why is because we have a fund balance of almost 5.8. It's $1 million above what we need, and that's already taking into consideration that $557,000 in deficit spending. That's what the fund balance is for, is to kind of fill some of those gaps when needed. So we are okay through the 28-29 school year. I think for me, the bigger question, and I think we definitely need to do long-term planning. We definitely need to consider, are we using this buildings most efficiently, and our staffing models most efficiently, all that stuff. But I do think the bigger question for me is how aggressively do we want to retain our teachers? And so like that means if we do the 1.2, we can do, I'm not thinking about bringing a lot of things back.
No.
But potentially the increase, 2.5% is not keeping up with our other districts.
So, Rick, I think that's probably a takeaway. I'm assuming we're heading towards another workshop, and we need to find a date. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks before the August board meeting. Because if we're even gonna have a discussion to go in November, we gotta have information and make decisions based on that before the end of August, right?
So if I hear correctly, based on the information we've been able to provide you over the last 48 hours, we've balanced the budget for this year. We've been able to show you what the future looks like. Just a balanced budget isn't going to be sufficient. We don't know
beyond this year.
Beyond this year.
Beyond this year.
So we do need an influx of revenue. Unfortunately, it's not going to come from anybody other than our local. We still have to figure out what's the right ask.
Yep.
And a workshop would be a good time to kind of go back through that. The next piece, just to, if you're okay with that, I was going to suggest that we should at least alert the community to what the timelines are if you were to go in November or February. Is that?
Yeah, that's fine.
So, do I have the right one?
Yep.
All right. So
we're past fall primary.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're at the bottom of the first column, 2024.
So
we have one last opportunity in the year of 2024 to ask if you do ask in November, that approval still would have revenue coming in this year. However, to do that, you have to make and pass a resolution on the amount and what it kind of is going for. So it's an operating cost. We're going to be specifically talking about, we want to invest in our staff, our teachers, our support staff, everybody from bus drivers through the organization. Our community has been very vocal about how much they appreciate our staff. And I think it's important for us to be market competitive, and we're not market competitive right now. So that, unfortunately, is going to require some additional money. We could wait until February, but you have to make the decision by December. Why I would tell you that April is not a good time to go is that I think our staff, although we said we want to invest in them and we want to support them, I believe we will lose our staff morale-wise, and we'll lose them by leaving the district because there's no promise that the community will pass it. And if I have a bird in the hand and know that River Falls is passed, Hudson's going in November, other districts have the ability, we're not going to be able to retain. So I believe that you really have 2 dates to consider. I think the work session would be a good time to talk about the pros and cons. The one thing I just do want to put out there for you is something that we talked about in the run-up to this, is that if you wait till February, the actual money and revenue does not come until the next year, and it really arrives in January of 2025.
So you couldn't say, we're going to do an increase mid-year?
Correct.
Because we wouldn't get it until the following year. Yep.
Right. And so those are some of the things, if, depending on the will of the board, if there were things to say with the alignment with curriculum, and you heard about building the thinking classroom, we need to be able to invest in some of our technology and our staff on professional development. I would argue that the sooner you have those dollars, the sooner you're able to have known things and start the long-term planning. You can't long-term plan when you don't have the money. And so I think that's what we ran into. I would recommend, if we could, to have a work session because of people's vacations and things like that, sometime between now and the end of July, so that we can at least know whether or not August is going to be a significant date in which we would have to work with Quarles and Brady, have the resolution ready and all that paperwork. That takes time. And it has to be then to the county, right, by the 27th?
Rick, I want to make sure that we give you guys enough time to give us accurate information on things that we need. So if July isn't doable, then we can do it in August and we'll figure it out. So I think we don't have to decide tonight, but I want you guys to kind of go back and think about, okay, we need updated numbers on these sheets. If we're going to, number one, we're kind of talking about staff retention. What other gaps that we had to cut out of last year's referendum not passing? If there's gaps that you think, a position or two that we think we need to fill, or, a ratio that's out of whack that we think we need to hire another teacher, I think those things should all be on the table. How much is that going to cost to bring back? And go from there, and then that's going to impact the spreadsheets that we're looking at right now, and decrease the timeline for when our fund balance is going to be below our policy.
So to take a little timing stress off you, I'm out of town all of next week, so just
I don't want, and I don't. I mean, our deadline is August 27th.
We got time.
If we want to go in November, we don't want to be going into a workshop on August 26th, I get it, but like if we got to push something out to give you, just make sure you guys have enough time to put stuff together for us to look at, and so we can have, coming out of that meeting, I think coming out of the workshop, we should be knowing when, how much and when.
So the other thing though, if I recall.
And what comes back, and what we're doing with the money.
We also need to have a single item meeting to look at approve
staff
or
increase,
whatever the staff increase, right? So would we want to try to pair that at the same time? And was there a deadline for that?
Probably not. You probably need that sooner.
For being able to advance people on salaries, it would be best if we could do that in July.
Okay.
And then yes, it would be more economical to tether them, but if I was worried that you were out in August.
I am, but, so the first, let me go back to the staff thing. Can we do a virtual meeting? Is that an option?
Well, we just looked at a policy that said no.
I can't remember. So
No, it didn't say no. It said
If
with
there's-
approval by the board chair, board
Like the
president.
single member, but it didn't, I didn't think it
Only if
allowed
there's-
all of us.
I'm just, and just so we can get a quorum, maybe all we need to do is
It
find a
wasn't
date and
my
get a
first
quorum.
meeting.
I don't think that's not going to pass,
Not a-
but I think we can figure that out. I don't think we should try to couple them together, especially if it's going to put you guys in a bind to not have information that we need for this.
Yeah.
I'd rather just get that passed separately and get it done.
Who else is going to be out in July?
In July?
Yeah.
Well, I'm gone next week.
Okay. And then, are you gone the first 2 weeks in August?
Just one.
Okay. All right. So what we'll do is we'll have a doodle calendar that'll go out. We do have 2 meetings. One would be a work session to further discuss the actual amounts, and then the pro-con of November versus April.
Yep.
Okay. Then you would also like, and we should have some discussion about what are some things that were, or basically, but what would come back? What are the priorities that you have?
Yeah, you got staff retention, you got busing, and you got academic needs.
I don't think it's priorities that we have. I think it's priorities that your administration has.
I think we need,
Like,
yeah.
what are the things you're
Yep.
saying, okay, we are really worried about this?
We cut bone, and
Yeah.
what needs to come back from that.
Because where I stand, I'm fine with everything.
Yes.
Where everything's at, it's like, well, this is where it's at. I just want to know
Yeah.
what it's like. This is really hit too deep.
Okay. We can do that.
Okay.
All right.
Anything else? Should we move on? We're gonna move on. I gotta get, where did my sheet go? I already threw it away. All right. Lengthy discussion, but much needed one. Thank you. We're gonna move on. Recognition of visitors. Anybody even in the audience that would care to be recognized right now?
A lot of community members.
All right. We'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. We're adjourned. Thank you. 9:20.